like yesterday was a long time ago. Now death brings you back again, and though I want to turn away, like love, it stares into my face when death comes stealing. Like you stole my heart.
Time Warner Audiobooks presents When Death Comes Stealing by Valerie Wilson Wesley, read by Angela Bassett.
Hello? Is that you, Tamara? The voice on the phone asked. I recognized him at once but didn't answer. Dwayne Curtis was the last person on earth I felt like talking to this Sunday morning. Is that you? He asked again. Who the hell else do you think it is? You called my house, didn't you? I finally said. I need to talk to you, Tamara. It can't wait. I'm in a phone booth down the parkway. Dwayne Curtis's assumption that I should arrange my life to suit his needs enraged me. 15 years ago when I married him, I'd been young and foolish enough to think his arrogant selfishness was strength. I knew better now. What do you want? I reached for a cigarette in the nightstand drawer, forgetting I stopped 6 months ago. Dwayne had that effect on me. I need to talk to you. Something's gone down. I gotta come by Tammy. So it's Tammy now, I thought. It must be serious. He hadn't called me Tammy since I'd left him. Tammy, Dwayne said again. Terrence is dead. Sweet Jesus, I said and sat up. Give me a few minutes to put on some clothes, Dwayne, and come on by. I hung up and sat there for a minute. Dwayne may have been a tired-ass son of a bitch when it came to women, but he loved his sons. I knew this must have hit him like nothing else could. Dwayne had 4 sons by different wives, including Jamal, the one I'd given him. Except for Hakeem, who at 16 was the closest to Jamal in age and the one I'd helped raise for the 5 years we'd been together, I really didn't know the others. I'd seen Gerard a couple of times. He was the one Dwayne had had by his white wife, Emma. I'd seen Terrence, the one by his first wife, even less. Terrence and Gerard were both losers as far as I could tell. Terrence messed with crack, and Gerard always had a nasty attitude, like he'd as soon pull out an Uzi and waste you as nod hello. Dwayne's sperm must have improved with age. Jamal and Hakeem were both turning out okay. I tried to remember the last time I'd seen Terrence, but I kept drawing a blank. I could only remember him as a kid. The first time I'd met him, he'd come by our place the day I brought Jamal home from the hospital. He'd been a big-eyed 8-year-old who knew Dolores, his mama, hated my guts, and who'd brought his new baby brother the Furious 5 album and a bottle of apple juice anyway. It's hard to say what will happen to a kid in a lifetime. I don't know when Terrence started messing with crack or why life had jerked him around like it had, but he didn't deserve to die at 22. Nobody does. Hey, Ma, can you give me a couple of dollars? Jamal said, breaking into my thoughts as he bounded into my room. He shot up a foot over the summer, but he hadn't yet grown into his body. He moved like a baby giraffe, all legs and height. I could see my dead brother Johnny whenever I looked at him. We gotta talk, I said. He read my eyes and worry flitted across his face. What happened? Your daddy called a few minutes ago. Terrence died yesterday. He didn't say anything, but his eyes filled with tears and he quickly glanced away. He saw his 2 oldest brothers maybe twice a year, but he always spoke of them with affection, imagining, I guess, the relationship he wished they had. How'd he die? Crack, I said. I didn't know that for sure, but I assumed that was what had killed him. Did your daddy tell you Terrence was doing crack? Jamal nodded. I never knew what Dwayne told him, and I rarely asked. Their relationship was theirs. Dwayne was an asshole, and I only hoped that simple truth would not hurt Jamal as much as it had hurt me when he finally found it out. I hugged him. After a minute, he pulled away. "Is the funeral going to be soon?" "Your daddy will be coming by in a few minutes, and you can talk to him about the arrangements he's made." He nodded and headed toward his room. I pulled on some jeans and the Howard University t-shirt I bought the last time I was in D.C. and went into the kitchen to fix myself a pot of strong Jamaican coffee. In the past few years, I managed to clear up my life of the things that aggravate my spirit. I used to be a cop. Some might say I couldn't handle the shit I was supposed to put up with, being black, being a woman, and I guess that's about right. I quit 4 years ago, and Hayle Investigative Services Incorporated was born. Since then, I've changed lots of things. I see as little of Duane Curtis as I can, but blood is blood, as my brother Johnny used to say. He died when I was 20, which is probably why I married Duane at 21. Grief will do that to you. Duane always seems to pop back into my life like the proverbial bad penny, and there doesn't seem to be a lot I can do about it. I can't deny my son his father. But my peace of mind is another matter. And that's what was at risk as I faced him over coffee this morning. I love that boy, Tamara. Why does everyone I love leave me? I studied Duane for a minute. He was as fine in his 40s as he had been in his 30s, but now he had money and attitude. Even this morning, in the midst of his grief, he looked as if he had just stepped off the pages of GQ. I noticed the tears in the corners of his eyes. I'd seen Duane in a lot of moods, but I'd never seen him cry. "I wish I could say something, Duane, except I'm sorry." "Just letting me come here is enough, Tammy." "Don't call me Tammy," I snapped. It had been his pet name for me when we were married, and the sound of it rolling off his lips made me want to puke. He looked at me, surprised, then hurt. I quickly turned away. It had taken me years to get over our joke of a marriage, and I didn't want to see any of his sudden vulnerability. "Tamara, there's something I gotta tell you. Terrence wasn't the first of my boys to die." "Duane, you have 4 sons," I said patiently. "I know how terrible this is for you, but you've only lost 1 son, not 2. He looked at me in disbelief. "I never told you about my boy in Virginia, did I? He was down there and I was up here, and..." Anger hit me so deep I could almost taste it. Throughout our 5 years of marriage, Duane Curtis would lie to me about anything, from how much he had paid for a bag of cookies to where he'd spent the night. "So, you have another kid?" I asked, pouring myself more coffee. I took a sip, not allowing him to see my feelings. That was the one good thing being a cop had taught me. I could lie with my eyes as easily as the coldest bastard who walked the streets. I was 22. The mother was 20. It was 1969, liberation times, but not down there. A woman got pregnant, she had to have it. But there wasn't any love between us. Not like there was between you and me. I let that one pass. But I did stay in touch with the boy. She named him after me, Duane. Did she have a name? Willa. I sent him what I could, although I wasn't a daddy like I was to the rest of my boys. When did he die? A year ago yesterday. The 4th day of October, the same day as Terrence. A chill went through me, but I had heard of stranger things. During my years in the department, I'd seen so much shit without reason or rhyme, it didn't even shock me anymore. One of the reasons I had to leave. "Tamara, something's not right. I know it. Something's happening to my kids. Somebody's kicking my ass with a pattern I can't see." "There's no pattern, Duane. It's just a terrible coincidence. How did your first son die?" "Shot. Hold up," the cop said. "Do they know who did it?" "They've been holding some kid for trial, a boy not much older than Akeem. They say he had Duane Jr.'s wallet and car keys." "And Terrence? How did he die? An overdose?" Duane looked down at his lap. Maybe the shame of how his son had died or how he had let him live was hitting him for the first time. He looked old suddenly. "Yeah," he finally said. Tamara, something isn't right about this, my kid. What's not right is that they're young, I said, and that you love them. And I thought to myself that your guilt is kicking in, how you weren't there for them like you should have been. He started to cry without any sound, the tears rolling down his face. Jamal came into the kitchen then and sat down next to him. I left them alone together, closing the kitchen door behind me. After a few minutes, Duane came in. Tammy, could you go to my boy's place and look around and see what you could find? His question caught me off guard. There's nothing to find, Duane. The cops thought he was just another junkie. They might have missed something. That boy was trying to stay away from coke. He hadn't done anything for 2 months. Something else killed him. I'll pay you for it, Tamara. Double whatever you charge, plus expenses. Despite myself, my interest picked up. I was doing better than I had the first few years after I'd left the force, but things were slow this month. I could use the cash. Jamal came into the room and glanced up at me, a begging in his eyes. Okay, Duane, I said after a minute. I'll go over to Terrence's place and see what I can find. Jamal gave me a look that said, thanks. I'll do it for you, I thought, as I gave him a half smile, and for skinny little Terrence who defied his mama's wishes and came to bring you his blessings. In all the time I'd been with Duane, he never told me exactly how he made his money, but there always seemed to be plenty of it. In the first year of our marriage, I'd been too stupid to ask questions. In the last, I'd been too smart. The first thing I did after I got my PI license was run a check on Duane Curtis. He owned a couple of clubs in East Orange and one in New Brunswick. I had heard he was part of a group that handled stolen cars, and rumor had it that he and his boy, Basil Dupree, laundered money for the mob. But nobody could catch him. He was smart, like a rat. When I stepped into Duane's office, I stopped dead in my tracks. Last time I'd been here, the couch had shared cigarette burns with the coffee table, but the place was now a soft, creamy color, and the chocolate-colored corduroy couch looked brand new. The new receptionist, who'd replaced the gum-smacking, weave-tossing sister who sat in the spot last time I'd been here, definitely added some class. "May I help you?" she asked, pronouncing each word as if she were rehearsing for a play. She was plumpish, what Johnny, my dead brother, used to call healthy, and looked like she'd been raised on grits and fried country ham. Her frumpy gray suit made her look 10 years older than I thought she probably was, but she was pretty in a way that didn't call attention to itself. Down-home pretty. I wonder if it's fucking this one, I thought. "Is Mr. Curtis in?" "No, I'm afraid not." "Hi, I'm Tamara Hayle. I know who you are." Sister had a bit of an attitude. I decided to ignore it. "Mr. Curtis told me to stop by for the keys to his late son's apartment. Did he leave them for me?" "Oh, yes," she said. She reached into the drawer, pulled out a set of keys, and handed them to me. I noticed that the tips of some of her fingers were missing. I wondered if it were a birth defect or an accident. She caught me looking and folded her hand into a ball. "He said to tell you that the address is 241 Avon Avenue here in Newark." "New here?" I asked, knowing she was. "Couple of months," she said. "Actually, I've been here since May." She had a soft southern accent that snuck through on the ends of her words. "Duane has really done some nice things with this place," I said, glancing around the office again, trying to make conversation. "Did he come into some money, miss?" I paused, waiting for her to give me her name. "July. Miss July?" "No, July is my first name." "You were born in July?" "No, October. My mama had a sense of humor." We both laughed. I knew the accent now. It was country, trying to sound city, and it touched something deep inside me. Her laugh was girlish, and dimples creased her cheeks. I liked her smile. "I'm ashamed of my name sometimes," she said shyly. "It sounds so country. Where are you from?" She looked up, surprised, as if I'd become too personal. "Around," she shrugged. Around here? South Florida, she finally said. Do you know which key opens which door? She asked. I glanced at the keys. Shouldn't be too hard to figure out. There's only 3. I held them up to show them in case she'd forgotten. So, when did the decorating start? I asked, glancing around the office. Before I came, she said. Looks good. I wouldn't know. I never saw it before. Dead end for that one, too. Okay, July, I'll be talking to you, I said, heading toward the door. Before I left, I turned to toss a parting comment. Too bad the way that boy went out. He was a nice kid. For a junkie, she said. Her bluntness startled me. I thought things were finally working for him, I said. Did he ever come around here? July looked puzzled for a moment, then smiled a sad, dimpled smile. You mean Terrence? He came up a couple of times to talk to Dwayne, but he never said too much to me, and before everybody knew it, he was dead. That's the way life is, I guess, short and sweet. She said it casually, like a thoughtless child delivering a zinger so cruel you want to slap her across the face. Her eyes went back to her work, fingers in a ball, pencil in her mouth. I was dismissed. Hope he's not fucking this one, I said to myself as I left, realizing in the next thought that I didn't really care. The boarding house where Terrence lived was old and ugly, the kind of place kids throw eggs at on Halloween. I rang the doorbell twice, and when nobody came, I cautiously let myself in. Hello? Anybody home? I called. The foyer was gray with worn brown carpet. The house had the damp, dark smell of a basement after a rain. What you want? Barked a croaky voice from out of nowhere. I tensed. Whoever was speaking sounded like she had a .22 trained at the back of my head. I turned around to face a tiny old woman, her face the color and shape of a chestnut. She looked vaguely familiar. Sorry to disturb you, I said. I'm Tamara Hayle. I'm a private detective. I've been asked by Terrence Curtis's father to look into his son's death. I like to go into Terrence's room and look around if that's possible. No, it's not possible, she said, examining me suspiciously. The boy dead. Bad enough he died here in my house without nobody coming to look in his room. She sucked her teeth in disgust and half-cocked her head, which was covered by a long blue-black wig. I used to be married to his daddy. Her expression didn't change. Look, I won't be here more than 5 or 10 minutes, I said. It's a special favor to his daddy. She studied me closely, running options back and forth in her mind. 10 minutes is all you got, she said, still eyeing me suspiciously. She reached in her pocket for a set of keys and headed up the stairs. I followed obediently. Why that boy would go and start messing with dope again? There's no telling about people these days. When I found that boy's body, You found the body? I asked, stopping mid-step. She looked at me as if surprised I didn't know. Yeah. He was playing his music too loud that night. I came up here to tell him to turn it down. I kept knocking, and finally I decided to go in and turn it down myself. When I came in, I seen he was dead. I called an ambulance. Where did you find him? Laying across his bed. The cops said it was cocaine that killed him. How long had Terrence lived here? 2, maybe 3 months. Terrence's room was the only one in the attic. She opened the door and stood back. Tell his daddy if there's anything he wants out of here, he better come on by and get it. Okay, I said. Thanks. 10 minutes, she said again and closed the door behind her. I stood for a moment in the sparsely furnished space, then walked over to the unmade bed where Terrence's body had been found. It seemed disrespectful to sit down, so I stood where I was and surveyed the room. The sheets and pillowcases were clean, and there were several cassette tapes lying on top of a portable tape deck. I turned on the deck, and John Coltrane's I Wish I Knew began to play. Terrence had probably been playing it when he died. I wondered where he'd learned to love jazz, certainly not from Dwayne, the only black man I knew whose taste ran to country music. I pulled the chair over to the head of the bed. What had Terrence seen when he drew his last breath? Ancient wallpaper of faded blue cornflowers, tossed pillows on the bottom of the bed. Was it a coincidence that the color of the pillows and the cornflowers were the same? Had he been making some half-ass attempt to decorate? A small refrigerator was tucked into a far corner. I opened it, prepared to be grossed out, but it was clean. A couple of apples, a half-quart of milk, a half bowl of leftover beef stew, half an apple pie. I sniffed the milk, fresh, the expiration date a week from now. I ran my hand across the tiny space behind the compartment that held the ice tray. Bingo. An envelope taped to the surface. I opened it. 3 crisp $100 bills. I closed the refrigerator, taking more of an interest now in the rest of the room. I spotted the trash can and examined its contents. A bunch of flowers under the papers, Mom's goldenrod, too fresh to throw away. I spread a few sheets of newspaper out on the floor and dumped the contents of the can onto it for a closer examination. The note that had come with the flowers, no name. An empty carton of allergy medicine. About 2 dozen used tissues. I went over to the bed, more tissues. There was a small cabinet above the sink in the far corner of the room. I opened it. 6 condoms, Trojans, neatly stacked in one corner, Listerine, nose drops. There are things you learn on the beat that always stay with you. A second sense, knowing the scent of something that doesn't smell right. And I smelt it now. Some lazy cop, tired at the end of the day, had proclaimed that Terrence Curtis had lived and died a junkie. But I knew now, if he had died of crack, he hadn't been an addict. Junkies don't have shit. They can't afford it. They eat crap. They don't have sex. Their lives are about nothing but junk. And whoever Terrence was, he hadn't been like that when he died. This room, filled with half-dead flowers, half-eaten food, and condoms stacked like candied mints, told me what I needed to know, as surely as if Terrence had been sitting here whispering the secret of his life and death in my ear. I took out the black and white notebook I always carried with me and wrote down the condition of everything I'd seen, from the medicine to the apple pie. Then I got out my Polaroid camera and snapped pictures. When I was through, I glanced around to see if I'd missed anything, and I spotted a picture I'd taken of Jamal and Terrence 9 years ago at Jamal's 5th birthday party. The sight of it made me want to cry.
I will miss you like a summer breeze when I'm cold on a wintry night. I will miss you like autumn leaves rustling in the calm of the night.
What happened? Jamal asked the minute I walked through the door. Nothing, I said, avoiding his eyes and handing him the suit I'd just picked up from the cleaners. I didn't want to burden him yet. You found out something, huh? Get dressed, I ordered, dismissing him with a look I knew he wouldn't challenge. Jamal poked out his mouth, grabbed his suit, and headed to his room. I changed clothes quickly, putting on a brown tweed suit and a pair of gold earrings Johnny gave me when I graduated from high school. I wear them as a talisman, and I reach for them tonight almost without thinking about it. You look good, son, I said to Jamal as he came out of his room. I'm always amazed how much a suit can change a kid. Ma, did you find out something? Didn't I tell you I didn't find out anything? I snapped. Jamal looked hurt, and for a moment I felt bad. You want to stop by Red Lobster on the way home tonight? I said as we headed out of the door. Jamal turned to me, anger flashing in his eyes. Don't think you're going to buy me off with 20 shrimp and red lobster. I have a right to know what you found out. It's not fair for you not to tell me, Jamal said. Life's not fair, I said, hoping to end the conversation. We went out to the garage, both of us silent until we were halfway out of the drive. I glanced at Jamal out of the corner of my eye. He was right. He did have a right to know about Terrence. I drove for a few blocks, then told him what I suspected. It just doesn't look like he died like they say. My voice was gentle. Junkies don't hide money. They don't eat part of an apple pie and save the rest for later. I knew my brother wasn't on drugs, Jamal said with conviction. Do you think somebody killed him? I don't know. I'm going to try and dig up the police report. Ma? Who would want to kill Terrence? I couldn't answer that question any better than he could, so it lingered unanswered as we headed up the stairs into the funeral home. We were greeted by the smell of decaying lilies and old man Morgan as we entered the foyer. Morgan wore a sad hang-dog look that immediately put you in the mood to mourn. It's good to see you again despite these sad circumstances, he said solemnly as he gave me a restrained hug. Morgan had buried my parents, and Johnny too. That memory was fresh in my mind, and as I entered the cool, dark space, I shut it out. Morgan pointed us toward the front of the room where Duane stood. Go and sit with your father and brothers, I whispered. I'm going to sit here closer to the back. Jamal headed toward his father without a backward glance. Duane hugged him and pointed him toward the space next to Hakeem, Jamal's brother. Duane glanced toward me and I nodded in his direction. He looked even worse than on Sunday. I settled into the last pew, the prime spot, to see who was there and who came in. Who would want to kill Terrence? There were two things I knew. One, any murderer is usually tied to the victim by blood or passion. Two, he or she would show up again, strolling by the house, driving by the cemetery, standing proper at the wake. I looked around the room. Terrence's mother, Dolores, sat next to Duane in the front pew. Her shoulders trembled as she wept. She'd been Duane's first wife. He married her right after coming up north, 7 years before marrying me. Hakeem sat next to Dolores. He still grieved for Amina, his mother. She was the only woman Duane claimed he really loved, probably because she'd done him the favor of dying before he got bored with her. Glancing up to look around the church, Hakeem smiled shyly when he caught my eye. He was 2 years older than Jamal, but he had a look of innocence about him, the kind most boys lost around 10. Gerard, Duane's 20-year-old son by his white wife, sat on the other side of Duane. As if on cue, he and his mama, Emma, rose to go to the front of the room where Terrence's open coffin lay. I decided now would be as good a time as any to go pay my last respects, but as I stood to go, a familiar voice kept me where I was. Why aren't you sitting with the rest of his women? Asked Basil Dupree, the rhythm of his Jamaican accent giving a sensual lilt to his words. You know I'm not one of Duane's women. What are you doing here? May I sit down? He sat beside me and smiled. No man I knew could look at a woman the way Basil Dupree could, and even in these solemn surroundings, I felt my body responding in ways I wished it wouldn't. His glance told me that he knew I was still attracted to him. He was right. When I first met him, I'd been married to Duane. Basil came to the house one night to drop something off. I opened the door, and the feeling between us was so electric, it moved everything that came into a hair's breadth of either of us. Lust at first sight. I'd never felt it with any man, not even Duane, and it scared the hell out of me. A kiss for the new bride, he announced, and ignoring Duane's angry gesture of refusal, he kissed me with so much passion I still get hot thinking about it. Needless to say, Duane was pissed as hell. It may have been the root of his falling out with Basil, but I suspect there was other stuff. Presently, Duane and Basil were enemies. His presence here puzzled me. "Why did you come?" I asked. Before he could answer, Carlotta Lee Curtis, Duane's fourth and present wife, grabbed the attention of us both. I had to hand it to the girl. She knew how to enter a funeral parlor. Diamond earrings, the size of dimes, sparkled from her ears, and her long reddish-brown weave bounced down her back like a stallion's mane. As she switched down the aisle toward the front where Duane was sitting, the eyes of every man in the gathering were glued to her perfect behind. Hakeem, who lived on and off with them, regarded her with respect you reserve for a rabid squirrel. "That one is a gutter cat," Basil whispered in my ear. "Your kind of woman," I said. "You're my kind of woman," he quipped. "But you can't trust that one. I hear she fucks anything in breeches, hedging up bets the way alley cats do." Miss Lee, the owner of Terrence's rooming house, strolled in behind Carlotta. She glanced around the place, caught my eye, and then looked right through me with eyes as cold as ice. "Her aunt," Basil said. I knew Carlotta's surname was Lee, but I hadn't made the connection. July, the woman from Duane's office, followed Miss Lee. Spotting me, she came over. "Which son is yours?" she asked, and sat down beside me. "He got so many I get 'em mixed up, but he's got one less now, I guess." Her tactlessness shocked me. "Excuse me," I said, not hiding my feelings. July winced. "God, I didn't mean it to sound so cold," she said, looking genuinely ashamed. "I always talk before I think," my uncle used to say. "I guess it's because I'm always hearing about him. You know how it is, fathers and their sons." Her eyes glanced up at me, begging my forgiveness. "I hadn't realized Duane talked so much about his kids," I said. Miss Lee suddenly rose and left the room in a snit. Carlotta turned to watch her go and then turned back around to face the front with an indifferent shrug. I wonder what that was about," July said. "They don't make too many bitches like Carlotta. I know I ain't supposed to be talking about my boss's wife like that, but I thought they were separated." "They did, for a while. When she threw out Hakeem, things were bad, but now he's back with her like a mangy old dog in heat." "Damn," I said, surprised again by her lack of discretion. My girl definitely said what was on her mind. "It's just, I don't know what she's doing here at the boy's funeral. She couldn't stand him any more than she could really stand Duane, but people will do anything for money." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well, nothing," she said quickly. She tossed me a good-natured, dimpled smile. "I'm going to go up and pay my respects to Dolores," I said, rising. "Talk to you later?" "Sure," she said. As I left, Basil got up too. "I have some words to say to his father," he said. I made my way to where Dolores was sitting, trying to think of the good things I'd heard Jamal say about Terrence, his sense of humor, his generosity when he was a kid, anything but the cocaine and how they were saying he died. As I stepped into the space between the bier that held the coffin and the first pew, I extended my hand to Dolores. But in the split second it took for her to acknowledge my presence, Duane caught sight of Basil standing behind me. Unbridled loathing filled his eyes. "What the fuck are you doing here?" he spat. "Get the fuck away from my son!" "May you and your sons rot in hell," Basil snarled. A collective gasp went through the 30 or 40 assorted friends and family of Duane and Dolores. Duane stepped behind me and grabbed Basil by the lapels. "Motherfucker!" he screamed at Basil. Hakeem looked at the coffin containing his brother's body and started to cry. I motioned to Jamal to usher him out of the pew. But at that moment, Basil left-hooked Duane with such force, blood and spit flew from the side of his mouth, sprinkling both the boys and Dolores. "Stop it! Damn you both! Couldn't you wait until your son was buried to start this kind of shit?" Dolores cried. Duane glanced her way for a second, and in that moment, Basil hit him so hard that Duane fell over backward. "That one's for Bettina, you filthy son of a bitch." Duane hit the side of the pew with a thud. The blows fell hot and heavy then. Morgan made his way to the front and pushed the bier holding the coffin back against the wall, fearing they'd spill Terrence's last remains onto the floor. I made my way toward Hakeem and Jamal. "Why, Ma, why are they doing this?" Jamal half cried. I shook my head in disgust, mystified. Jamal and Hakeem, clearly shaken, moved quickly out of the front door. "Do you want to stay with us tonight?" I whispered to Hakeem as soon as we were outside. He nodded. "He's a bastard, isn't he? A bastard," I heard July mutter as we were leaving. I didn't stop to ask her who she was talking about, Duane or Bassett. When we got home, both boys went right to bed. I poured myself a shot of Courvoisier, filled the tub, and lay back sipping cognac until I couldn't keep my eyes open. Then I pulled myself into bed and called the only person I knew I could at this time of the night. He answered on the first ring. "What's wrong, Tamara? Everything okay with Jamal?" "Yeah, he's fine." "Are you okay?" "I don't know. You want me to come over?" "No." "Jake." "Yeah." "Some shit is going down with this case I'm working on. I need to run some things by you." "You gonna be in your office tomorrow?" "Yeah, I'll come by. Thanks for always being there, Jake." I hung up, rolled over and closed my eyes, thinking about the fight, about Jake, and somewhere in the back of my mind the name Bettina lingered, keeping me from restful sleep. The next morning, I wrote a note to Jamal, dressed, and headed for my small office in East Orange. I rent office space from my best friend, Angie. The street floor of the building is taken up by Jan's Beauty Biscuit. Don't ask me what biscuits have to do with beauty, or why Wavetta, the owner, named her shop after Jan, her mother, instead of herself. You can always find out what's going on in East Orange from Wavetta. All kinds of sisters drop into the biscuit for services. And if you sit long enough with your mouth shut, you're liable to find out anything you need to know about anybody. Today was Wednesday, Wavetta's late day. She wouldn't be in until 10:30. I checked our mutual mailbox in the lobby and headed up the stairs. My office is a large carpeted room flanked on either side by windows. On the sill of one sits my orphan aloe plant. I pour leftover tea on it when I'm too lazy to carry the cup to the bathroom. When I first got my PI license, Angie gave me a good deal, and I've been here for about 3 years. Even though it's expensive and half the time I just break even, I love this place. It's where I come to do my serious thinking and remind myself I really do have a job. I tossed my coat on the rack, filled the kettle, and called my service. "Hi, Karen. Is Tamara Hayle. Got anything for me?" "Hi, Miss Hayle. Angie called. She said, 'Where's your rusty behind? I've been calling you for 2 days. Is it a man?' She also said she wanted to know if you'll meet her for dinner sometime between now and when you both go through the change." I grinned. Angie and her silly behind. She knew she wasn't supposed to be leaving no simple message like that on my service. "Anybody else?" "Yeah, Basil Dupree. I love the sound of that man's voice, Miss Hayle. Ooh, Lord." "Get hold of yourself, girl. What did he say?" "He asked you to meet him at the Crystal Lounge at 2 o'clock on Friday. Said he had some information about Terrence and Gerard." My heart skipped a beat. That was it? "That's what the man said." "Thanks, Karen," I said, and hung up. Basil Dupree. The hatred that had flashed in his eyes when he hit Duane last night had come from the bottom of his soul. I wondered why it was there and what he knew about Terrence's death. I turned on my computer, took out a new disk, and created a file. Duane Curtis. Then I typed in the name of everyone I'd seen over the last 24 hours who was even remotely connected to Terrence. Carlotta, Gerard, Basil, Hakeem, Miss Lee, July, Duane, Dolores, Emma. I typed in all the stuff I'd found at Terrence's apartment, from the nearly dead flowers to the allergy capsules, to the $300 and the food in the refrigerator. It's amazing how first-hand impressions can take on new meaning when you look at them in the company of firm data. Carlotta's smile. I'm not sure why I typed it, but there it was. I wondered if Wavetta had anything on Carlotta. Somebody had to do that weave. I made a mental note to drop into the biscuit for a manicure. Wivetta. I typed in her name, chuckling as I did it. Old Wivetta would be pissed as hell if she knew I were typing her name into a computer file on a murder case. Murder. That word came up fast. It could have been an accident. Who would want to kill Terrence? I'm getting silly with this mess now, I said out loud. Silly, just plain simple. Yeah, simple for not keeping your door locked. What the hell kind of ex-cop are you? Said Jake as he entered my office, taking me by surprise. I thought I locked it. Look again. He jingled the doorknob to demonstrate, and the lock shook obediently. Got a screwdriver? I looked into my drawer and found one. Jake began working on the lock. I always forget how fine Jake is. Our feelings go deeper than lust or even love. He followed Johnny into the department, but left bitter and angry and went to law school to become a public defender. I called him more than I should, when I can't make sense of a case or when I just need a shoulder to cry on. His instincts for this business are the best I've ever seen. It scares me to think that he's probably the only man that I could ever really love. He finished fooling around with the door and sat down on the chair beside me. So what won't let you get a good night's sleep, he asked, leaning back in his chair. Want some tea? That bad? I just asked if you wanted some tea. He grinned. None of that herbal mess you keep around. Instant coffee? Okay. I plugged the kettle in and put some granules in a cup. I'm doing some work for Dwayne. Work? Jesus, Tamara. He shook his head in disgust. Why are you letting that fool back into your life? The kettle went off and I poured the water into the cup. I felt sorry for him. Did you hear about his son? Which one? The freak or the head? The drug addict. Which one's the freak, I asked, even though I knew it had to be Gerard. Jake, is Gerard into some kind of weird shit? What happened to Terrence, he asked, ignoring me. The cops said he died of an overdose, but Dwayne thinks somebody killed him and he hired me to find out. I can't see somebody killing Terrence. He was just an addict, maybe sold shit a couple of times, but basically a user. Actually, Terrence is the second boy to die. Dwayne's oldest son was murdered in a robbery down in Virginia a year ago. Jesus, to lose 2 kids like that? Even that bastard doesn't deserve it. He took a sip of coffee. So how's he doing? He was all tore up on Sunday when he came by. He thinks somebody's killing his kids, and now that I'm into it, there's something about Terrence's death that bothers me, Jake. I don't think there's a plot, but I don't think he died like they say. Jake took a sip of coffee and studied my face. Why don't you run it down? I told him from the beginning, starting with Dwayne's Sunday morning call, lingering on my trip to Terrence's apartment, ending with a fight at the funeral. How's Jamal taking all this? About as well as can be expected. Hakeem stayed over last night. Why did you call Gerard a freak? Attorney-client privilege information. One of the guys in the office had him for a client. Most of this shit is juvie, hustling mostly. Petty larceny, nothing big time, but it's been piling up since he turned 18. I wondered if that was what Basil had to tell me. Is Carlotta still with Dwayne? That's what they say. The ex knows how to pick 'em, with, of course, one exception. He gave me a wink, then looked at his watch. I gotta get out of here. Phyllis has her appointment at noon. How's Phyllis doing? The same. Phyllis, Jake's wife for 16 years, has been crazy for 8. The doctors say she's a manic depressive, and she's fine as long as she takes her pills. And mostly she does, but sometimes she doesn't. We were friends once, Phyllis and I, when she married Jake and when Johnny was alive. There are times when I hate Phyllis because I know he'll never leave her. Then I feel like a first-class bitch. But there are times when I love her for fighting her craziness like she has to do. Jake, standing up to leave, changed the subject. Tamara, if you sense there's something to this thing, go for it. But remember this. Dwayne is one of those dudes that evil seeks out like pins seek a magnet, so don't get too close, or he'll stick you too. He winked and closed the door behind him.
Thunder, I hear thunder, thunder before the storm. hear thunder, waiting patiently for the calm.
I don't want to get involved in no shit between Dwayne's ex-wives, July said when I called her to get Emma's number and address. Jake had told me to follow my instincts, and they were taking me to Gerard and his mama. I won't tell her where I got it, I said. And there's no shit to get between. The truth was, I didn't know Emma well enough for there to be anything between us. What I had heard about her from Dwayne had made me feel sorry for her more than anything else. Her daddy, Sanderson Fuller, was one of the richest white men in Essex County, and her marriage to Dwayne nearly killed him. He'd disinherited her. She supported herself by substitute teaching and the small handouts her mother gave her before she died. Her house was a sad little number. It had despair painted on it like a coat of Benjamin Moore. The fence had so many pickets missing it looked snaggletooth. I pushed the bell, and the noise echoed into an empty house. Damn, I muttered to myself and turned to go. But as I stepped off the porch, glass shattered, and then a scream and voices, a woman and a man's, came bellowing from inside. "You damn bitch! It's none of your business where I put my dick." I recognized the voice as Gerard. He said something unintelligible, and then Emma started shrieking. "What if he catches you together? Have you thought about that, Gerard? It's not a secret. If I found out, think about the others who must know." There was the sound of more glass breaking, and then a wail from Emma that tore at my heart. "I don't give a flying fuck," Gerard yelled back. "Not about you or him or anybody but her." "Damn you," Emma shrieked. Something in her voice alarmed me. I rang the bell again, leaning onto it now, and finally Emma came to the door, stopping short when she saw me. I knew she was wondering if I heard the fight. I relieved her curiosity. "What's going on?" I asked. There was a slash of red across her cheek. She saw my eyes go to the mark and started to cry. Gerard came flying down the stairs, heading toward the front door. "Bitch," he spat. "I see who the fuck I want and do what the fuck I want." Emma and I stood there in silent amazement. "Scummy little bastard," I finally muttered under my breath. But when I saw the look in Emma's eyes, I was sorry I said it. We stood there in the doorway for a few uncomfortable moments. "Do you want to go inside?" I finally asked, as if it were my place instead of hers. She nodded, and I followed her in. "I just don't know what to do," she said. "It's hard bringing them up by yourself." It was weak, but it was the best I could come up with. I knew that if any child of mine ever uttered words like that, he wouldn't have made it to the front door with his face on. "Sometimes I wish he were dead." She went pale and her lip trembled. I didn't mean that," she stuttered. "It's just that I can't control him anymore. I think he hates me." "No kid hates his mama. Everybody fights with her kid now and then." "Not like we fight," she said. My girl was right about that, and she knew it. I wondered just how violent things got between them. "Why did you come by?" she asked, as if remembering for the first time that I was there. "Dwayne asked me to look into Terrence's death," I said. "Dwayne? Wow. I almost forgot that you were married to him, too." The wow got me. Hippie stuff. I'd forgotten she was a child of the 60s, like Dwayne. We savored our mutual connection in respectful silence for a minute, then she pulled a photo album off the top of a china cabinet. "Would you like to see my pictures?" she asked, like a kid. I was too surprised to do anything but give her a puzzled nod. She opened the book to a photo of her as a kid on a horse. "So when did Dwayne come into your life?" I asked. She looked at me as if she didn't understand for a moment. "I came into his," she said. "I met him at Rutgers in 1973. We became friends. One thing led to another. We got married. We had a kid a year later. He left me." Anger curled around the edges of her words. "My father hated his nigger ass." Who you calling a nigger, white girl? I hadn't heard a white person say that word since I'd left the department. Now I'm a nigger too, you know, she said as if responding to my unspoken anger. Maybe that's your problem. Maybe that's why your son is so messed up, I thought. Do you see your parents now? I asked. My father cut me off. My mother died. I don't have anyone but Gerard, she said with no emotion, just resignation. I'm sorry, I said. I was. Marrying Duane had been the most daring thing she'd done in her life, and she had nothing to show for it but a fucked up son and the worst-looking house on the block. Don't be too sorry, she snapped, rich white folks' pride shining through. With a slam of the album, she brought things back to the present. Up until I saw him Tuesday, in that box, I hadn't seen much of Terrence Curtis since he was 15, she said. I really didn't know that much about him. I can't help you. She gave me a quick, dismissive nod. Gerard is probably the one I should talk to, I said, cautiously handing her my card. Would you ask him to give me a call? Tell him there's something in it for him. I was lying, of course. There was absolutely nothing in it for him. He and Terrence did see each other from time to time, but they really weren't friends. More like business acquaintances. Business acquaintances? Ask Gerard, she said, suddenly mysterious. But it was too late for that in the end. I sat on the white leather sofa in Basil Dupree's living room waiting for him to join me. He had called me early Friday morning and asked if we could meet at 8 at his apartment instead of the Crystal Lounge. Not too reluctantly, I agreed. But now that voice inside me that whispers, danger, had started murmuring in my ear. I'd arrived at his apartment building early and taken the private elevator to his floor. I got out but stopped short at the sound of Basil speaking in rapid-fire patois to another man. Basil grabbed the man by the lapels and shoved him violently up against the wall. I gasped, and Basil turned in my direction. He opened the apartment door for me. I'll join you in a moment. Please, go in, pour yourself a glass of champagne. I'll come in a moment. The man, glad for a moment of grace, straightened his suit and gave me a smile, bowing his head slightly. Against my better judgment, I went inside. Basil came in within the moment, his smile as easy and seductive as always. We began to speak as if nothing had happened, but I couldn't forget the scene I'd just witnessed, not to mention the scene at the funeral. What did you have to tell me about Gerard and Terrence? Who is Bettina? I asked quickly, the questions tumbling out. Why do you ask me about Bettina? You went off on Duane like nobody's business at Terrence's wake, I said. I think somebody may have killed Terrence Curtis, and I want to find out who it was. Does Bettina have something to do with this? You really think somebody killed him? Yes, I said firmly. He paused for a moment. Do you think I killed his son? Did you? Did I think he had killed Terrence? I honestly didn't know. You don't know the background of what you saw in the hall. Don't jump to conclusions, he warned. What was it about? You don't want to know, he said, suddenly deadly serious. I cleared my throat. Why did you all fight like that at Terrence's wake? I asked. Business between me and Duane. What business? Ask him. Who is Bettina? So we backed it out again, huh? Don't you want to know what I have to tell you about Gerard and Terrence? I want to know about Bettina first. The look of discomfort that flashed in his eyes when her name came up was unmistakable. I don't want to go into it now. Then why did you call me? Because I want to fuck you. Despite the fact that he was stating the obvious, the word startled me. I couldn't remember the last time a man had stated his intention so crudely. I wasn't sure whether I should leave or stay put and commend him for his truthfulness. I took a long sip of champagne in lieu of a response. You know you want the same thing, he said matter-of-factly. I can tell by the way your body moves when you're near me. Don't be so presumptuous, I said primly. First of all, I don't fuck men that I'm interested in. He laughed with a touch of disdain. "Excuse my choice of language," he said. "In the world I deal with, we say what we mean. You deal in that same world, Tamara. Words mean little. Fuck, make love. It comes down to the same thing. I'm not ready for that. What would make it right between us? I came here to get some answers. You've gotten them." "Did you kill Duane's son?" I asked, bringing the conversation back where I wanted it. "What do you think?" "Have you ever killed anybody?" "You know the answer to that. Why do you ask it?" "Why do you hate Duane so much?" "Because he owes me a debt that must be repaid with his blood." "Who is Bettina? Would you like some more champagne?" I accepted the refill, but repeated my question. "She was my baby sister," he said quietly. "The anniversary of her death was the day of the wake, and she's dead because of Duane Curtis." He began to speak as if reciting a tale from memory. "I come here from Kingston without a pot of piss in and money to send home. I'm an only son with 4 sisters. Bettina was the youngest. I met Duane Curtis in some dealings I had with the Italians. He was older than me, richer, smarter. I tried to impress him. He glanced at me to get a quick read of my feelings. I would have done anything for him. We were best friends, you know. Bettina came to the States to join me. She fell for his lies and the money he spent to impress her. She thought he was a true love. He broke her heart, but we both know how Duane Curtis goes through his women. His women. He tossed those words at me at Terrence's wake. I cringed now when I heard them. It was with him that she smoked ganja the first time, but she soon went on to stronger medicine. She died a junkie whore before she was 22. He unfastened a gold locket from around his neck. My gift to her when she came to the States. She wore it until the day she died. Solid gold. She sold herself before she would sell it, he said as he handed the necklace to me. I thought of Johnny and those gold earrings he had given me at my high school graduation. Good luck charms. I snapped open Bettina's locket and examined the face of the young girl inside. She was my heart. Her death must be repaid in blood. The blood of the father, not that of the sons. Whatever come first. He placed the locket around his neck. I was stunned by his words. Was he talking about my son, too? He must have noticed the question in my eyes because he changed the subject quickly. "Tell me, Tamara," he asked, "how did you get involved with a man like Duane Curtis?" He sensed my weakness and asked the one question I asked myself for the past 15 years. "Youth, more than anything else," I answered. "Youth and grief." I settled back then, lulled by the champagne and a sudden intimacy that was puzzling but completely seductive. I told him about Johnny, about how sadness and fear can make you do things you regret. "We're more alike than either of us wants to admit," he said. "And I am as afraid of you as you are of me. That makes us even." Somehow I didn't question his sincerity. He turned my face toward his and kissed me shyly. Then he parted my lips with an urgency that startled me. There was an undercurrent of violence to Basil that repulsed yet fascinated me. I have always been drawn to danger, laughing at the devil. That's what Johnny used to call it. Who was this man whose body I could so easily imagine coming into mine, and what did that say about me? "Wait," I demanded and sat up. "Why?" he asked. I hesitated, trying to think of a reason, but my mind was blank. "Tamara, there are things I've had to do in this world to survive. Those parts of me you are afraid of will never touch you. On the grave of my sister Bettina, I swear it." Basil kissed me again as if to reassure my doubts. He knew instinctively those parts of my body that were the most responsive and touched them with his lips, his fingers, his tongue in ways that left me wanting more. He began to undress me. The truth was I was more eager for him than I wanted him to know, and there was no way I could conceal it. "Come," he said, gesturing toward his bedroom. "Okay," I said. "Just give me a minute." I kissed him lightly. After he left, I sat on the couch for a moment trying to collect my thoughts. I'd come here on business, hard, dry, murder business, and I was about to make love with the man who could have done the killing. My choice was clear. I could collect my things, sneak out of the door, and wonder for the rest of my life what it would have felt like to have Basil inside of me. Or I could go into his room. It was then that I heard my pager shoved earlier into my bag. Guilt swept me as my home phone number flashed across the tiny screen. Jamal. He would only beep me if it was an emergency. I sat down, blouse half off, and called my son as quickly as I could. Jamal answered on the first ring. He was crying, and he didn't try to hide it. "Ma," he said, "he's dead. Daddy says he's dead." "Who, Jamal?" "Gerard," he sobbed. "Please, Mama, come home. Please come home, Mommy." My breath couldn't come for a moment. "Okay, baby, I'm on my way." I was in a daze as I went to Basil. His nude body, partially covered by charcoal sheets, lay across his bed in lustful expectation. "I've got to go home," I said numbly, avoiding his eyes. I didn't want to take the time to explain. I couldn't. I left quickly without looking back. I was halfway home when I realized Basil hadn't told me what I'd come to hear. I cursed out loud, but then a thought came to me that caused the hair to stand up on the back of my arms. Yesterday was Thursday, and Gerard was dead. There had been just 5 days between his death and that of his brother. Gerard Curtis was found dead in Duane's mother's house in Belvington Heights, a mostly white suburb north of Newark. The neighbor Duane paid to keep an eye on the place found him floating in a tub full of water early Friday morning. The cops were calling it an accidental drowning. Duane and I both knew better. We sat in the office of Roscoe DeLorca, captain of the Belvington Heights Police Department, listening to the official version of events. I'd been a cop there, and this was the first time I'd been in the precinct since I'd left. For 5 years, DeLorca had been my reluctant mentor and protector, and he'd been pissed when I quit. But I was here this Saturday morning in my professional, private, investigatory role, not as one of his men, and he wore his kindly public servant persona as he questioned Duane. "So there's been no one living in the house for more than a year?" "Not since my mother died," Duane said. He looked nervous. I knew it was because he didn't like cops. "Were you aware that your son has several arrests as a minor for drug trafficking?" DeLorca asked. "Yeah, I knew. Your ex-wife, the boy's mother, told us that he'd been a regular abuser of drugs and alcohol since he was a junior in high school. The reason I'm bringing all this up now is because we think drug and alcohol abuse played some role in this tragedy. We think he visited your mother's house, maybe got high on barbiturates and alcohol, passed out in the tub, and drowned." DeLorca paused, waiting for a reaction, then continued. "There are signs, Mr. Curtis, that your son had been there before. Did he have a set of keys?" "No." "Do you have any idea how he could have gained entry to the house?" A look I couldn't read, shame, anger, flashed momentarily in Duane's eyes. DeLorca noticed it too. "I don't know how he got into that house," Duane said. "What I do know, Captain, is that my son didn't die accidentally. I have 2 sons dead in less than a week. Somebody is killing my boys, Captain." "I don't think it's a coincidence, Captain," I tossed in my 2 cents worth. "I don't think the first boy died of a drug overdose like the officers in Newark assumed, and I'm not sure if an autopsy was done." "Of course there was an autopsy," DeLorca said. But despite his response, a nearly imperceptible twitch in DeLorca's left eye told me that I had his attention. "The evidence indicates that alcohol and drug abuse were going on prior to the drowning. There was a slight bruise on his right ankle, but that was very likely something he'd gotten before. There is no indication your son Gerard was murdered." "But you can't be absolutely sure," I said. "Nothing's absolutely sure, Hayle," DeLorca barked like I was still in the department. He rang for a police clerk who quickly appeared. "Take Mr. Curtis over to the coroner's office to pick up his son's effects," he said. "Miss Hayle," he said to me, "could you stay for a few more moments?" As soon as we heard Duane's footsteps in the distance, DeLorca turned to me. "What's your involvement in all this?" "Duane is my ex-husband, Jamal's father." "Oh, how's the boy doing?" "Good, Chief," I said. "How old is he now?" 14, but still big for his age. DeLorca nodded, his eyes avoiding mine. I knew then that he still remembered. Jamal had been 9 when it happened, the reason I left the force. I'd asked Marvin Wiggins, the teenager next door, to watch him that night. Marvin was a good kid, football player, popular, and Jamal adored him. Marvin and some of the other teenagers who lived nearby were going to the Willowbrook Mall to buy Jamal some sneakers. They'd started at 8 when the mall closed at 9, probably driving faster than they should have been. They were also a car full of young black men cruising through Bevington Heights after dark in a late-model car, and that meant trouble. My brethren in blue pulled them over because of the speed, they said, and got nasty when Marvin gave them some lip. They bloodied his nose for being a smart-ass nigger, then knocked him around for good measure and asked if anybody else wanted some. Jamal peed his pants. When he started to cry, they knew he was a kid, big for his age, and let him go. But some cops liked to brag. 5 big black bucks. I heard somebody joking about it in the locker room. I didn't know what they were talking about until DeLorca called me in an hour later to tell me what happened. Red-faced with rage, he assured me the cops would be punished, but I could feel my dinner rising in my throat. I went to the nearest can and threw up. I quit 2 weeks later. "How are things going otherwise?" DeLorca asked. How's business?" "Fine," I said. "The usual stuff, cheating husbands, murders cops won't touch." "Jesus Christ, Hale, this isn't murder. Why are you taking it there?" "Because it's there, Captain," I said. "You're barking up the wrong tree, Hale." He tossed me a set of photos of Gerard taken at the death scene. "Here," he said. "Think you can find murder in these, Miss Murder," she wrote. "Just a dumb, dead kid drowned in a tub, nothing more." I glanced down at the black and white photos and lost my breath. I remember Gerard, alive and cursing out his mama on Wednesday afternoon. I hadn't liked him. His mama hadn't even liked him. But his pale, naked body looked small and vulnerable, floating in the old-fashioned tub. "When will the medical examiner be finished with his report?" I asked, handing them back to DeLorca. "Later on this week." The door opened, and Duane, eyes watery, came back in. He carried a brown paper bag filled with Gerard's personal effects. "My condolences, Mr. Curtis," DeLorca said. Duane nodded weakly. We thanked DeLorca for his time and headed out. My house was empty when I walked in. I started thinking about Gerard. When did it start to go wrong? He and Jamal were the same blood. A chill went through me, past my bones into my soul. "Somebody walking on your grave," my grandma used to say when I was a kid. "But Grandma, I'm not dead yet." "Don't need to be dead for somebody to be walking on your grave or your son's grave." I got myself a shot of brandy even though it was just past noon. When Jamal walked in, I poured it down the sink. "Where have you been?" I asked him. "Playing ball at the court." "What the hell is wrong with you? You know damn well you're supposed to leave me a note." "Good God, Ma, it's 12:30 in the afternoon." "I want you to be careful, Jamal," I said. "Why?" he asked, throwing me a suspicious glance. "Come here." He came over and sat down beside me. "Are you worried about what's been happening, Jamal?" He let out a sigh. "I heard you talking last night, and Dad said something about all these accidents not being accidents, about somebody being out to get him, how he couldn't make it stop." "There's nothing to stop." "Is somebody going to try and kill me?" "No, of course not," I said too quickly, and he knew it. "Nobody is out to get Duane," I said as convincingly as I could. Terrence and Gerard's deaths may have been connected. Both of them may have been involved in some shit we don't know about yet. Jamal gave me a slight, caught you smile when I said shit. Then his face turned serious again. What are you going to do, Ma? All I can, talk to some more people. The doorbell rang then, and Jamal, assuming it was for him, popped up to answer it. Hi there, is your mom home? A vaguely familiar voice asked. I'm from your father's office. It's a lady who says she's from Dad's office, he called from the door. Ma, can we talk later? I'm going to meet Hakeem at the court. Yeah, be back before dark. Before dark? God, Ma. I could hear him muttering to himself as he ran out the back door. July, grinning, stood at the door listening to our conversation, holding a large tan envelope in her hand. Hi, she said good-naturedly. I came by to give you this. Is that Jamal? She asked as the back of Jamal's head disappeared out the back door. She was wearing jeans and looked younger than she had the other times I'd seen her. She seemed more confident, too. And that rural accent she had the first time I talked to her had vanished completely. I wondered again if there was anything going on between her and Duane. A man's attention can bring that kind of light to a woman's eyes if she needs it, and I felt instinctively that July had needed something. Yeah, that's Jamal, I said. What are you doing working on a Saturday? With all these tragic happenings, I've been putting in some extra hours. What do you do for him anyway? Type, answer the phone. I do what I need to get by, she said, handing me the envelope. Come on in for a minute, I said, opening the envelope. It was from the Newark Department of Health and Human Services, a copy of Terrence's death certificate. I put it on a side table to examine later. God, I envy you, July said, surveying the living room as she walked in. Why? You got it all together? You got your own business, making no money, a nice house I inherited from my parents. You got a nice kid. Motherhood's not all it's cracked up to be, I said. You want something to drink, some tea, soda? A soda sounds good. I got us both a Sprite and we sat down on the couch. Duane mentioned he hired you to find out what was going on. I was surprised that he'd mention it to her. Haven't found out much yet, but something will turn up eventually. I sounded more confident than I actually was. Wasn't that a weird scene at the funeral? Weird isn't the word I'd use, I said. Just sad, disrespectful. Well, at least they had a funeral. Have you ever known a dead person who didn't have a funeral? I asked playfully. Yeah, plenty, she said very seriously, taking another sip of soda. I won't have a funeral. Of course you'll have a funeral, July. Everybody has a funeral, I said. What a weird thing to say. I'm in kind of a weird mood. I had a birthday last week, she said quickly, changing the subject. I was 30 on October 1st, but everybody in my family is dead, so there was nobody to celebrate with me. Nobody to celebrate, nobody to mourn, nobody but me. She said it with a wistful sadness that hit me in my gut. My parents are dead, too. My mother killed herself, July added quickly, almost offhandedly. My older brother Johnny killed himself, too, I said after a moment. He shot himself through the head about 15 years ago. I had just turned 20. July glanced up at me, a look of kinship, maybe gratitude in her eyes. She took my hand, then let it go. At least your parents left you this house. My mama didn't leave me shit. It was strange the way she said it, going from Johnny's death to the house like that. But my life had been marked by young grief, too. I knew the signs. July had them, and this was one, the inability to let yourself feel. Sometimes death came down to what was tangible. July was right. I did have the house, but July had something, too. Your mother left you, July. That's not enough. Do you ever feel that way? Sometimes. I read all the self-help books on self-esteem I can. They tell you to find the source of your pain and cut it out. That's what I'm trying to do, slowly but surely. One cut at a time. That's as good a way as any, I said. Her weird edge made sense now. I had it too at times. Want to get together for lunch sometimes? I asked as I walked her to the car. Sure, she said. I'd love to. Happy belated birthday, I said. Thanks, she yelled as she drove away. Let me know when yours is. Maybe we can celebrate. I went back into the house, a smile still on my face for July, and opened the envelope from Health and Human Services. Terrence had died from an overdose of cocaine. I felt angry and betrayed. Delorca was right. The wrong goddamn tree, I said aloud, jamming the document back into the envelope. I woke up at 5 the next morning. Here I was again, missing another Sunday morning's worth of good sleep. Damn. Terrence had died of a cocaine overdose, and Gerard's body floating dead in a claw-footed tub had etched itself into my mind. What was the connection? I lay back down, stretched, feeling the full length of my body and remembering how Basil's lips had felt when they touched me Friday night. Desire for him swept through me. But Tina. Then a thought came that smacked me awake like somebody's mama. Was he telling me the truth? Or had he been trying to throw me off his track? For all I knew, Bettina could be alive and well and eating saltfish and ackee back in Kingston. Or maybe she didn't exist. Why had I never heard about her from anybody else? The phrase he used to describe Carlotta suddenly came to mind. Hedging her bets the way alley cats do. Was he hedging his bets too? Basil Dupree. What did I really know about him? I should know by now that any time I'm attracted to someone, there's something wrong with him. Terrence had died of an overdose, and Gerard had died of drowning, but it had only been 5 days. 5 days was possible, but close for coincidence. Basil had access to cocaine. Where had he been when Gerard died? What had he wanted to tell me? There was no sense in trying to go back to sleep. This whole mess was starting to work me like an old dog works a shoe. I pulled on a pair of jeans, scribbled Jamal a note, and made my way to my office on Main Street. I opened Duane's file on my computer. Wednesday, October 8th, came up in bright green letters. I printed out the file, then I typed a new entry, Sunday, October 12th, and added the police version of Gerard's death. I looked back at the October 8th list. It still looked odd. Junkies don't leave half a bowl of beef stew. Junkies don't leave $300 in hard bills taped inside a refrigerator. I pulled out the Polaroids I'd taken of the stuff from his wastebasket. Flowers, goldenrod. They made me think of Jamal and how he couldn't get within 6 feet of flowers without sneezing his head off. It's always the obvious that doesn't belong. Delorca used to tell me that. Look for a pattern. Where was it? Terrence had died of an overdose. Gerard had died in the tub. 2 freak fatal accidents. Maybe that was the pattern. 2 murders that looked like accidents by somebody who knew enough about each boy to arrange it. But how do you make a 22-year-old kid take enough dope to kill himself? How do you drown a 20-year-old boy in a tub? Who could hate Duane that much? I glanced at the list of folks connected to Terrence I'd made on Wednesday, deleting Gerard's name. Carlotta, Basil, Hakeem, Miss Lee, July, Duane, Dolores, Emma. No bells went off. There had to be a motive, and except for Basil, who was obvious as hell about his revenge, none of them had one. More like business acquaintances. Emma's words came back to me. Terrence was a user. Gerard had been a seller. Could that be the connection? Maybe it had nothing to do with Duane. If it was murder, there had been a method to it. And if there was a method, I could find it. The secret of a victim's death is in his life. I studied the photos again. Flowers, goldenrod. Strange when you thought about it. They didn't belong here. Girlfriends usually sent something more obvious. Red roses, maybe. Who the hell would send a kid like Terrence flowers? Why would he throw them away still fresh? Flowers, Kleenex, Benadryl. Now that was a pattern. Smell the flowers, sneeze your butt off, blow your nose, pop a pill, if you're Jamal. Or maybe Terrence. Allergies run in families. Duane had them, Jamal had them, possibly Terrence had them too. But goldenrod doesn't kill you, and there was cocaine in his blood, so I was back to square one. I looked at the list again. In his apartment, he'd had cold capsules. But capsules can't kill you, unless they're filled with cyanide, like in all the detective novels from the 30s. So that left cocaine. I have a couple of textbooks on poison saved from my days in the academy. I picked one up and searched for a section on cocaine. Cocaine, methylbenzoylecogene. As I scanned the list, I realized people didn't just sniff and inject the stuff. Sometimes they ingested it. Ingestion was the least toxic means, but poisoning happened. This put everything in a new light. It's much easier to make a junkie suddenly gone good swallow cocaine than it was to force him to start smoking crack again. According to the book, it would take at least a teaspoon of pure cocaine to kill a guy of Terrence's weight and height, or less if something else was added. They don't test for poisons when an autopsy is done, unless a specific test is requested. If poison and cocaine were used, the cocaine would be picked up, but not the poison, especially if it were something exotic that didn't give physical signs after death. I'd bet my parents' house they hadn't tested for poisons, even the predictable ones. Why waste money on a junkie? How could it have happened? My imagination went wild. Somebody knowing about the allergy could have tampered with the capsules, filled them tight with coke, and then with something else. A junkie would take 4 pills when 2 would do the job. Terrence was an ex-junkie, and if those capsules were filled with something other than Benadryl, they could have killed him fast. Maybe I was on to something. Whoever sent the flowers probably did the killing. I would have to call every florist within a 10 or 15-mile radius. There had to be a record somewhere, a bill, an order form. But did the person who killed Terrence also kill Gerard? There had to be more to it. I reached for the phone to call Jake, then put it down. It wasn't quite 9, too early to call anybody on a Sunday morning. I wondered if Jamal was up yet. A sudden sense of dread swept through me. Had I put the double lock on the doors when I left? The phone rang. I picked it up on the first ring. Ma, how come you left so early? I had some stuff to do. Is it something to do with Gerard? No, I lied. When you coming home? It was the first time in 2 years he'd asked me that. In a couple of minutes, I said, Jamal, I love you. I love you too, Ma, he said after a moment. Will you pick up some Dunkin' Donuts and Egg McMuffins? He asked, figuring he'd play my mood for all it was worth. Okay, is the door double locked? Yeah, I checked it when I got up. A first time for that, too. See you, baby. Okay, he said, but I could hear the anxiety in his voice. Gerard and Terrence were still on my mind as I nearly hit a red late-model car pulling away from the curb. Damn, I said, turning into my driveway. Jamal was sitting at the table waiting for his breakfast when I walked in. He was eager to play some ball with Hakeem in the park, and when I handed him his Egg McMuffins, he made quick work of them. Any anxiety I thought I heard in his voice earlier seemed to have disappeared. After he left, I started going through the phone book, counting florists. When the doorbell rang, I took my time answering, figuring Jamal had forgotten his keys. I opened the door, and Basil Dupree stood on the porch, nonchalantly leaning against my rail. How did you know where I lived? No, hello, Basil. I'm happy to see you. He cocked his head and smiled. Hello, Basil. How did you know my address? You're not hard to find if you know where to look. He paused for a moment. I was worried about you. I can take care of myself. Why didn't you call me at my office? Today is Sunday. Why are you here? I asked bluntly. I owe you some information, he said. Okay, I said after a moment. But my son and his buddies will be coming back shortly. I don't want them seeing strange men coming in and out of the house. Strange men. A hurt flashed in his eyes. You really don't trust me, do you? He asked, smiling his charming smile. No. Do you want to talk on the porch? The folks on my block believe in minding other people's business, and I didn't want mine making the rounds. I stood back so he could enter. Want some coffee, I asked. I led the way into the kitchen. He sat down at the kitchen table and looked around. So, when will we take up where we left off, After you tell me what you promised to tell me. Thank you, he said with exaggerated formality.
Death seeks joy in a sad face. Oh, yeah. It lingers around, waiting to unveil its cloud. Oh.
The coffee finished perking, and I took out 2 large cups from my pantry, conscious of his eyes on my body and liking the way it felt. Why'd you leave me so mysterious last Friday? He asked. Duane's son Gerard was killed. I had to go home to be with my boy, I said, studying his face for a reaction. There wasn't any. Gerard Curtis dead. It doesn't surprise me, he said. How'd he die? He drowned in a tub. You're bullshitting me. The cops say he was high on booze and downers, but I think something else went down. I took a sip of coffee and glanced at him seductively over the rim of my cup. A smile played on the edge of his lips. See, I think I killed this one too, I didn't say that. If you knew him at all, you knew he was a kind of slimy son of a bitch who deserved to drown in somebody's tub. I'd said similar words to his mama, of all people. Not 4 days ago, but the sneer on Basil's face as he said those words sent a chill through me. Who deserves to die that young? Some of those who do. You don't mean that. I didn't mention Bettina, but I knew by the pain in his eyes that he knew who I was referring to. I felt reassured. Would he show such feeling so easily for a dead sister who was still alive? Let's not speak of death, he said, with an exaggerated poetic flair. Death has been what I've been dealing with for the last week. What'd you mean when you said that mess about Carlotta? I added. The stuff about her fucking anything in britches like an alley cat. Just what it sound like, he said. Carlotta had been fucking Gerard. Terrence knew it. Gerard knew he knew it. Carlotta knew he knew it. And now you know it. I stared at him in disbelief. Carlotta is a grown woman, I said. She 22, Tamara, the same age as you when you first met. He paused for effect, then continued. 2 years older than Gerard. That could explain the violent argument I heard that day on the porch between Emma and Gerard. How do you know about it? I asked Basil. Gerard had a big mouth. He made that fool of an ex-husband of yours a laughing stock in every circle he ran in. From the waiters in that shitty club where he hangs to that weird little secretary who answers his phone. Her fucking his son behind his back in his own mama's house. Did Duane know? I asked. When you get something like that on a man like Duane, you keep it to yourself. And Terrence knew? Word was somebody was paying him not to tell Duane. Before he died, Terrence was throwing money around like he'd won the lottery. Gerard was doing some light coke deals with some high school kids, so he had money. But it could have been Carlotta, too. I poured some more coffee in our cups and sat back down, my knee gently brushing Basil's under the table. Basil, why are you telling me this? What's in this for you? What is it with you, woman? You don't take gifts offered or keep promises made, he added. You know what I want to tell you. Come back with me to my place. I studied his face carefully, the dark eyes that could glow with either desire or deception. Bedroom eyes, my grandma used to call them. Could this face that I found so bewitching be that of a killer? Not today, I said. When? He asked. He shifted slightly in his seat, and I noticed the bulge of a .38 concealed unsuccessfully in the folds of his expensive leather jacket. His eyes widened slightly, telling me he knew that I'd noticed it. I'm not sure I want to go anywhere with a man who carries a gun. You were a cop? You have one? I hate guns, I said, and I meant it. Mine is licensed, he added. I need it for protection. Protection from who? Women like you, who can see through lies. So, I am seduced and abandoned, he added with a self-mocking grin. You got what you want from me, and now you leave me to pine away in despair rejection. Basil, you and I both know that you never have and never will pine away in despair rejection, for me or any woman. You know me less well than you think, Tamara Hayle, he said. He stood, straightening his jacket to conceal the gun more successfully. Then he placed a playful kiss on my lips and turned to leave. But that kiss, lingering on the soft inner edges of my mouth, made my body remember last Friday. Desire happens with no warning or reflective moment. When I thought about it later, I realized Basil was as unprepared as I was for what happened next, for this act of nature that swept us like a violent downpour. The sexual fever between us this time was not the leisurely seduction of Friday night. It was a flash fire that struck as hot and quick as anything I'd ever known. We were undressed before I knew it, tossing our clothes in a heap on the floor. But the doubt lingered. Could Basil be the killer? That thought and the sudden hardness of the kitchen floor snapped me back to reality. Basil sensed my coolness and pulled away. What's wrong? Nothing, I murmured, catching my breath. Do you want to go upstairs? I thought for a moment. There was a very real possibility that my teenage son would pop in here and find his mother rolling around on the kitchen floor with a man who had cursed out his father at his dead brother's funeral. I cringed at the thought. Would making love to Basil in my bedroom ease my mind? Was my hesitancy some instinct about danger I was following? I'm not any more sure about what's between us than I was on Friday, I finally said. The risk cut both ways. I am as much in your power as you are in mine. We sat back down at the table, back to square one. You think I have something to do with those boys dying? He asked after a minute. I didn't say that. You don't have to. Basil, make up your mind, my love, he said. And a piece of advice for you. Don't let killers into your home. He said it with a bitter tone in his voice that made me cringe. Will we see each other again? I asked, as Basil pulled on his jacket, the notion of the gun catching my attention for a fraction of a moment. He paused. That's up to you. Goodbye, Tamara, he said softly and kissed me. I couldn't trust my voice to come out normal, so I didn't say anything. After he'd gone, I sat looking at my cup half filled with cold coffee. Should we have gone upstairs? What harm would it have done? I was suddenly swept with a sense of regret so strong that I nearly called out his name. But as it ended up, I didn't have time to think about missing a roll on the kitchen floor with Basil. Jamal and Hakeem came bounding into the house. Did the guy who tried to beat up Daddy at the funeral just leave here? Jamal demanded. I immediately knew I'd made the right decision. No, I lied. Jamal and Hakeem headed into the living room to watch some videos. Can I stay here tonight, Aunt Tam? Hakeem asked later when I asked Jamal to set the table for dinner. Yeah, Hakeem, you can stay. Will you cook something in the wok? He was the only kid I knew who actually liked the stuff I stir-fry. No, man, Jamal said to him with disgust. Shut up, Jamal, I said. Call your grandma. We'll do the wok, but you've got to chop. Hakeem called his grandmother and then joined me in the kitchen. As he chopped celery and onions, he ran his mouth about basketball, about how he liked chemistry but didn't want to tell anybody. The kinds of things he never told Jamal because Jamal was too young, nor his grandma because she was too old. But I only half listened. My mind stayed on Basil while I stir-fried the chicken, watched the Sunday night movie, and curled up under my down comforter to go to sleep. When the phone rang, I half hoped it was Basil, but it was Jake. "You sleep?" "No, not really." "Did Jamal tell you I called?" "That jive little Negro never tells me squat. But I was going to call you. Did you hear about Gerard?" I sat up. "Yeah, what the hell is going on, Tam?" "I don't know. I found out something today, though." I told him all the things Basil had told me earlier. I didn't mention my adventure on the kitchen floor. "You think someone could see that Terrence would have a fatal allergy attack?" Jake asked. "Why not just shoot him?" "They wanted it to seem like an accident." "So you agree with Dwayne?" "I don't think it was a conspiracy," I said, "but I think it was indirectly related to Dwayne." "But who?" "It could be somebody who knew him, picked up the pills for him as a favor." I paused. "I don't think he bought those flowers himself. I've been meaning to check to see if they were delivered, but they could have been picked up in any supermarket. They might have been a gift Terrence accepted out of courtesy and then threw away, and that could mean he knew the person and didn't want to hurt his or her feelings. Whoever it was knew him well enough to know he had allergies or that they ran in Dwayne's family. How much cocaine would it have taken to kill him? A teaspoon? But maybe it wasn't cocaine alone. Maybe something was mixed with it to make it fatal. "There could be something to that, Tam," he said. "We had a case a couple of years back when somebody ground up some hemlock stems. The perp put it in some brownings with LSD. Terrence was throwing around money before he died. What if he was blackmailing Gerard and Carlotta?" "That would explain the money you found in his refrigerator," Jake said. "It also explains why Gerard and Carlotta weren't exactly grieving at Terrence's wake. Tell me what you know about Carlotta." 22, pretty," I said. "Carlotta Lee is her maiden name. Her aunt was Terrence's landlady, Miss Lee." "Cleotha Lee?" Jake asked. "Cleotha? I don't know. Who is Cleotha Lee?" I asked. "About 20 years ago, Cleotha Lee used to launder money for the mob. Gave seed money to small-time hoodlums like your ex. Nothing big time, but it kept her in furs and wigs." "Do you think she knew Dwayne back then?" "She may have. Do you think Dwayne knew about Carlotta and Gerard?" "I think he might have suspected something," I said, remembering the strange look in Dwayne's eyes when Delorca asked him if he knew how Gerard had gotten into his mother's locked house. "Do you think Dwayne could have killed Terrence?" Jake asked bluntly. "No, Jake. Dwayne wouldn't kill his own son. He'd throw Carlotta out first. Maybe he didn't go over there meaning to kill Gerard. Maybe things just got out of hand," Jake added persistently. "Then why would he keep paying me to find a killer? He asked you to do it before Gerard was dead." "Dwayne didn't do anything to Gerard, Jake. That killing in the tub was premeditated. And that's another thing. How do you drown a grown man in a tub? It was one of those old-fashioned claw-footed jobs with the sloping back, right?" "How'd you know?" "We used to have one in my mama's place. Somebody's relaxing in one of those tubs high on weed or wine, and wham! You grab their ankles and give 'em a yank. Head goes under the water, slides too slippery to grab, and pull yourself back up." I thought about it for a moment. It's not a man's way to kill. If Carlotta killed Terrence to stop some blackmailing, maybe she killed Gerard too. I thought about that. Carlotta seemed pretty cold, but why would she kill her lover? "I didn't tell you something else. Don't rule out your boy Basil in all of this." My heart stopped. "What do you mean, my boy Basil?" I asked. "Be careful, that's all I'm saying." He said it in a big brother tone, but there was an edge to it. Was it jealousy? "Word is he can't go home because he killed somebody in the islands. The guy who killed his father. Revenge is big with guys like Basil." Revenge. My stomach sank. Bettina. "Have you ever heard that Basil had a sister, Bettina?" I asked cautiously. "No. What about her?" "I heard Dwayne was responsible for her becoming a hooker, for her death. Turning out whores isn't Dwayne's style." "Do you think Basil could have something to do with Gerard or Terrence?" I asked. He paused a few moments before he answered. "If he does, it's more than you can handle, Tam." "What if this is going to touch Jamal?" I whispered like a kid might, as if saying it aloud would make it happen. Tamara, you know I'm here for you, anytime, day or night, Jake said. I'm scared to death, Jake. Whatever went down, it has nothing to do with you and Jamal, Jake said firmly. This is Dwayne's mess, something to do with his pretty young wife, her crooked old aunt, and his thug of an ex-partner. I cringed when he said that. Thug of an ex-partner I almost made love to on my kitchen floor. Or was it fucked? Why don't you call Dwayne tomorrow and tell him you're out of it, Jake continued. I stopped short. I don't want to give up that easily. Make me a promise, baby. Send Dwayne a bill and let it go, okay? I don't know. Stay out of it, Tam. Dwayne is like fucking quicksand. Don't get trapped by him again, you hear me? Jake, I'm not a fool. How could you say something like that? I know you, Tam. If there's some loser with a dangerous edge to him, you're probably going to fall in love with him before the month is out. I resent that, Jake. I was angry because I knew he was right. Angry because it should have been him instead of Basil. But it wasn't, and it probably never would be. Jake, just leave me the fuck alone. I felt tears coming to my eyes. Tam, Jake said gently, promise me you'll take the whole mess we've been talking about to Delorca. Some cops do care about catching the bad guys. One of them is Delorca. You know that. Jake was right about Delorca, and he had hit upon an indisputable truth. Dwayne was in my life more than I needed him to be. Okay, I agreed. I'll call Delorca, and I'll tell Dwayne what's up tomorrow when I go to work. And when I hung up, I meant it. Wivetta Green was the only sister I knew who changed hairdos like most folks change clothes. When I walked into Jan's Beauty Biscuit, her hair was piled high on her head and she dyed the ends burnt orange. Girl, guess who walked in here when I opened the door? Your ex, Dwayne. And guess who comes strolling in 10 minutes after he'd left? Mrs. Carlotta Lee Curtis. Dwayne and Carlotta both looking for me, but not together, I'd bet. Yeah, I'm always glad to see Carlotta. She's definitely my girl with her $500 weave. But girlfriend was looking bad this morning. Looked like something evil was gnawing at her. I was right. Wivetta did do Carlotta's weave. I'd get the dirt later. What did they say before they left? Mr. Fine-ass silver Lexus driving Dwayne said to ask you to call him as soon as you can. She said she'd call you later on today. Thanks, Wivetta, I said, and headed up the stairs fast. The phone rang before I could take my coat off. Where the fuck have you been? Dwayne asked impatiently. Who the fuck do you think you're talking to? I snapped back. I'm sorry, Tammy. This shit has been coming down on me so fast and hard I can't even talk decently to a decent woman. Don't call me Tammy, I added, still mad. I'm sorry, Tamara. I threw that little slut I was married to out of my house this morning. He found out about her and Gerard, I thought to myself. Why? I feigned innocence. Is there any way I can see you so we can talk in person? Before we go any further with this, I said, I've been doing some thinking about everything that's been happening. There are some things going on between you and your wife and her aunt and Basil. What does that old bitch have to do with anything? And Basil, that filthy son of a bitch, don't even say his name to me, Tamara. I want out, I said. I don't want to be involved anymore. Today is my last day. Tomorrow morning, I'm sending you my bill. I'd appreciate it if... You want more money? He asked sharply. I want my peace of mind back, I said, my voice rising. This whole mess has gotten bad for my nerves. Bad for your nerves? What about my nerves, Tamara? Damn, you bitches. It's always about you, isn't it? Fuck you, Dwayne, I said, pissed. Just send me my damn... Wait, please, Tamara, he said, begging. Jesus, on my mother's grave, I'm sorry. Listen to me for a minute. My boys, Tamara, all my boys. Sons you never really thought about until they started dying. Okay, he said. Maybe it's because I feel like shit, because I haven't been there for them like I should have. But that means I owe them to find out who's doing this. Please help me. Get somebody else. The number of people I trust number about 4, and one of them, my mama, is dead. The second one, you, well, you know where that stands between us. And that cunt I was married to, I just threw out. For all I know, she could have killed Terrence. She had enough good reason to do it, and that's for goddamn sure. He definitely knew about Carlotta and Gerard, and about Terrence, too. My call waiting line clicked. "I gotta take this call," I said. "I'll get right back to you." I clicked over, eager to get away. A whispery voice floated over the other end. Carlotta. "Miss Hayle," she said. "I wanted to know if I could make an appointment to talk to you." Miss Hayle? Wavetta was right. She sounded bad. "Carlotta, can you tell me what this is about?" I asked. "I can't talk now. I'm staying with my aunt over in Avon. Could we talk over here?" As always, my curiosity was getting the better of me. I decided I owed Terrence one more day. "In about an hour?" I asked Carlotta. "Yeah. If you talk to my husband, don't tell him I called," she added quickly and hung up. I clicked back over to Dwayne. "Can you give me another week?" Dwayne asked. "I've made up my mind." "Have it your own goddamn way," he said, and hung up. I had come full circle. I was back where I started, standing on the front porch of Miss Lee's house. I wondered whether I should tell Carlotta about leaving the case. Then I decided I wouldn't bother. She'd find out soon enough. I rang the doorbell. Carlotta came before the bell stopped chiming. Her face looked colorless and pinched. Her eyes were red. All in all, she looked like a heartbroken 16-year-old. "Thank you for coming," she said in a small, polite voice. "I'm just glad to be of help," I answered in a phony professional tone I used on occasions like this. We walked in silence down the dank foyer toward her aunt's apartment. She quickly opened 2 deadbolt locks. We stepped into a light-colored living room in which sunlight sparkled through the immaculately clean windows. "Please, sit down," Carlotta said with a nod toward a beige couch, and I sat down into it. She settled into a chair directly across from me and reached for a cigarette. "I need some information," she said. Her bottom lip quivered slightly as she spoke. "Dwayne told me he hired you, and I wanted to know if you'd found out anything about who had killed Gerard." She took 2 quick drags from the cigarette. "If you want me to pay you, I will." "Why do you need to find out?" "He was my husband's son. I want to know who killed him." "The cops say Gerard drowned accidentally in the tub. I don't think you believe that." She averted her eyes. "And I have my reasons, ones that are none of your damn business." "You mean you got a lot of reasons you don't want to go into?" I said. "Let's cut the bullshit," she said, her eyes latching onto mine. "Yeah, let's cut the bullshit," I said, meeting her attitude with mine. "I know you were fucking Gerard. I know Terrence knew it. I know Dwayne knows it now and just threw you out, probably because of it. But it may have been because you and Gerard killed his son. So why don't you just cut the bullshit and tell me what this is all about?" Her shoulders collapsed and she began to cry. It was grief so powerfully felt it brought tears to my eyes. I reached out, touching her shoulder gently. "My life is over," she muttered, shaking her head in despair. "Nobody knows how much I love him." "Dwayne?" I asked. She looked at me as if I had just spit on the rug. "No, not him. Gerard. I love Gerard." "Gerard?" I asked, not disguising my surprise. It had never crossed my mind Carlotta could actually love Gerard. "We were more alike than anyone I'd ever known. Now that he's gone, I don't have anybody," she said. "When did it happen?" She nervously tugged on her hair. "I knew Terrence in school. He introduced me to Gerard. It was before I married Dwayne." "You were sleeping with Gerard before you married Dwayne?" "We weren't sleeping together," she said, suddenly demure. "But we were friends." "When did things change?" "You know, I started my marriage wanting it to work," she said defensively. "Dwayne's so much older than me." "But you knew that when you married him." "I thought I loved him. He seemed to have it all together. He took care of me, and Clee liked him. She'd known him since he was a kid. She and his cousin Delroy used to go together back home in Virginia, where they're from. She told me it would be a good thing for me to do. Clee, my Aunt Cleotha." So Jake was right. She was Cleotha Lee, and things between her and Dwayne definitely went back. But nothing turned out like it was supposed to. Now Gerard is dead, and I'm back here with my aunt, where I started. Your aunt told you to marry Dwayne. Did she owe him something? Did he owe her? I asked, not disguising my curiosity. She didn't exactly tell me, but she wanted me to be with him, she said. And then we got married, and he brought the kid to live with us, and the kid hated me, and I hated the kid because he got in the way, and Gerard was there, and he couldn't stand Dwayne, and we just did it. We sat there for a minute. And then other things happened, Carlotta said quietly. What other things? I asked. A couple of months after we got married, he started drinking hard, doing light coke, like he was trying to kill something inside him. And then he couldn't do it anymore. You mean Dwayne was impotent? I guess that's what they call it, she said with a shrug. He just couldn't do it anymore. And Gerard could do it good. Did you ever find out what was wrong with him, besides not being able to do it? I asked finally. You know what? I didn't really try to find out, and I didn't really give a fuck, Carlotta said with finality. Dwayne, impotent. Big-time baby maker couldn't get it up now with his 22-year-old wife. I wanted to feel some glimmer of satisfaction at Dwayne's bad luck, but I couldn't. I wondered if it could be all tied up together, the loss of that first son, Dwayne Jr., and his sudden impotence, his confrontation with death and his own mortality. The latch turned on the front door, and Miss Lee, holding 2 path-marked bags, swooped into the room. When she spotted me, she scowled and shoved the groceries onto a nearby table. "What do you want?" she snapped. I told her to come, Carlotta said, glaring defiantly at her aunt. Why did you do something stupid like that? I wanted to ask her what she knows about Gerard. Nothing, Miss Lee said angrily. She don't know nothing because there's nothing to know. You don't know that, Carlotta said. I know more than you think, Miss Lee replied. I loved him, Clee. You didn't. I want some answers, Carlotta said, facing down her aunt with a conviction that told me they'd had this talk before. Cleotha Lee looked at me, then quickly back at her niece. You can just cut this shit out now, she ordered. I'm tired of this mess. You can kill a lot of things, Clee, Carlotta said, but you can't kill my feelings. You're better off what that boy did. Go on back to your husband where you belong. Just because you've forgotten how it feels to care about somebody, just because you left your life down home, don't mean you have to take mine away, Carlotta said, her voice shaking with anger. I didn't leave nothing down there besides torn drawers and hard times, Miss Lee said, glaring at Carlotta. Then she picked up the groceries and headed to the kitchen. Do what you want, girl. I'm tired of fooling with you. You want something to drink? Carlotta asked. Too early for me, I said. She chuckled. You sound like Gerard, she said girlishly. He would never drink before 3. She had a faraway look as she spoke about him. He seemed like a very sweet guy, I said, lying through my teeth. Yeah, he was special. He taught me a lot of stuff. Like what? Well, she paused for a moment, remembering. He taught me how to mix drinks, fancy ones like tequila sunrises and black Russians. Did he teach you to do drugs? I asked. She looked up, startled by my question. Kind of, she finally said. We used to smoke weed together, but it's not like he taught me to do other stuff. I don't do coke. Did he do other stuff? She shrugged. I guess. They said he had barbiturates in him when he died, I said. That's just cops making up shit, she said scornfully. When I left, he was just smoking weed. She gasped and looked guilty. So you were with Gerard the night he died? She paused for a moment. Yeah. And he was alive when you left? Yeah. Who had the keys to the house, you or him? I had them. Where did you get the keys? After we first started being together, I remember Dwayne's mother's house was empty, and I went to his office and got the extra set. I had 2 sets made, then I put them back. You made Gerard a set? Yeah. So he used the place, too, to meet other people. She looked surprised. I guess so. I never asked him. Was he expecting somebody that night? He was going out to meet somebody. Why are you asking me all these questions? She asked suddenly. It will help you feel better if you talk about it. That was a damn lie, but it sounded good, and she took the bait. What was he doing when you left? I asked. She sighed, giving in. Sitting in the tub, smoking a joint. We'd just gotten out of bed, messing around. He took a bath because the shower was broke. He said he had a meeting later on. And he didn't do any other drugs. She looked away, avoiding my eyes again. He may have done something. Sometimes he took things, if he was upset and wanted to be cool. But I left him sitting in the tub, smoking weed. What time was that? Around 11:30. I remember because Dwayne was coming home at midnight and I wanted to be there before he got home. The cops said he died at 11:50. Was anybody else in the house? Nobody else had keys, except Dwayne. And Gerard was alive when you left him? You're making me feel like I killed him, she said, her voice rising. Did you kill him, Carlotta? Damn you, leave me alone. If the cops think I killed him, I don't care because it's like I'm dead anyway. I stopped for a minute, then started again more gently. Maybe the cops are right. Maybe he just drowned like they said. She shrugged. I found $300 in Terrence's refrigerator when I came here last week, I said, shifting topics. Do you know how he could have gotten it? She looked surprised. No, she answered. Do you think Gerard could have given it to him to keep him quiet about you two? I gave Terrence the goddamn money. Now leave my niece alone, said Miss Lee, stomping into the living room. You said too much already, Lotta. Get out and let me handle this from here. Carlotta cringed and then spoke softly. I'm 22. I can do whatever I want, Clee. I let you do what you want and see where it got you, said Miss Lee. Somebody got to take care of things. You can't. Carlotta's eyes flashed with anger. You couldn't just let things be, could you, Clee? Why couldn't you just stay the fuck out of my life? Everything I've done has been for you. Not me, Clee. You. From the time Daddy died, Carlotta was facing her aunt now, her hands balled into fists. It's always about what would make things better for you. You gave me that old-ass son of a bitch like a present, she continued, her voice rising. What kind of shit did he have on your ass, Clee? Miss Lee didn't look at her, and Carlotta continued. Why did you kill Gerard? What kind of deals did you all cut in the old days? What did you owe him that you had to pay? I didn't kill Gerard, and you know it, she said to Carlotta. You as dumb as that stupid hoe my brother married. A look of shame that quickly turned to rage flashed across Carlotta's face, and she slapped her aunt with a violent smack that nearly knocked off her wig. I'm sick of you talking about my mother. You nothing but a slutty old heifer who shouldn't speak her name. A heifer who takes in your tired, stupid behind every time you come crawling back, Miss Lee replied with an ugly smirk. Then she backhanded Carlotta with a slap that made her grab her cheek with a squeal. When Miss Lee spoke again, it was patiently and slowly. You done said too much already. Just go on into your room. Carlotta left without looking at me or her aunt. We stood there in silence for a moment, me in shock, Miss Lee rubbing the back of her hand. Did you kill Terrence? It occurred to me suddenly that this tiny woman would do anything in the world she thought needed to be done to protect herself or even her niece if driven to it. If I had, you think I'd be fool enough to tell you? Miss Lee snapped. With those last words from her, I headed for the door. Her eyes were the coldest I've ever seen, on fish or human. The clock on the jet read 3 o'clock. I'd only been in there about an hour, but it had taken its toll. My head ached and my stomach was bucking. The one more day I'd promised Jake was drawing to a close, and I decided to go home. First thing tomorrow morning, I'd send Dwayne his bill. Jake was right. Whatever surrounded them was their own mess, and it had nothing to do with me and Jamal. After all that would happen was over, I would curse myself for letting my guard down. The price for my assumption was paid in blood, and I'm not sure I'll ever forgive myself. Jamal had told me that he and Akeem were going to play some ball in the court where they always played. They probably dropped by McDonald's for a burger, so I heated up a can of black bean soup. At 7, I started listening for Jamal. By 7:30, I rehearsed what I'd say when he finally dragged his late behind in the door. At 8, the phone rang. It was a woman's voice, official, gentle, and the moment I heard it, my heart stopped, because I'd used that voice myself on department business, telling somebody's mother or wife something she never wanted to hear. She told me that Hakeem Curtis, my son's brother, had been shot to death half an hour ago and that my son was an eyewitness. She asked me to come to the station to pick him up. I'm not sure what my thoughts were then. I just knew a raw fear pounding in the pit of my stomach. I don't know how I got there. I don't remember going inside, but I remember the tension in that room and the feel of grief of mothers, fathers, wives, husbands come to claim they're dead. "That's the kid's mother," I heard somebody whisper. "The dead one?" "The other." I could feel their eyes on me, and then a hush as a detective led me to Jamal, who sat against a wall, his body rocking to some silent song. His eyes were as empty and wide as a small, scared animal. I sat down next to him and said his name. He looked up at me as if he didn't know me. I grabbed him up into my arms. I've done enough grieving for both of us, and I had irrationally hoped my grief had somehow covered his. But I knew that night that grief can't be bartered, and it hurt me to my soul. The cop was named Griffin. His voice was hushed like a priest. "I'm going to have to ask the boy some questions." "It can't wait?" I asked him. "He might forget if we wait too long." "Son," Griffin said, "we've got to talk about what happened now." Jamal grabbed my hand. Both Griffin and I leaned forward to hear him when he finally spoke. He went to get something from somebody in a car." "Who?" I asked. "Who had something for him in a car?" He shrugged. "What did the person look like? What kind of car was he driving?" I was making myself talk like a cop, think through the pain. "Close your eyes and try to see that car. Was it a woman or a man behind the wheel?" Griffin asked. "Take it slow, baby," I said. "Think, then tell us." Jamal sighed, holding my hand so tightly it hurt. "I should have gone with him, Ma, when he ran off to the car." He began to cry. "After we finished playing, he said he had to pick something up from Daddy, and then he went to meet the car." "He was meeting your father when he went to meet the car?" asked Griffin. "Did you see Dwayne there?" I asked before Jamal could answer. "Was it your father's car?" "No, the car was red. Daddy's car is silver," Jamal said. I know it wasn't Daddy." "Tell me what he said again, as close as you can remember, son." "He just said he had to get something from Daddy. Somebody had something from Daddy, and he was late, and then he ran over to the lot where the car was parked, and then I heard the gun go off and the car drive away, and when I got there, he was dead," Jamal said, his voice rising with each word. He began to tremble. "Somebody had to give him something from Daddy? Are you sure he said that, son?" "Yes." "He didn't say what the something was?" "No." Griffin nodded for me to step over near the door, out of earshot of Jamal. "Do you think his father could have had something to do with this?" he asked. "No," I said, "not directly, but I think there's something you should know. There have been other killings. Dwayne's other sons, Gerard and Terrence, have died of unnatural causes within the last 10 days. "Unnatural causes? What do you mean?" "The first son died of a drug overdose. The second drowned accidentally in a tub." "Within 10 days?" he asked, his eyes suspicious. "Yeah." "Where?" "The first in Newark, the second in Belvington Heights, but the medical examiner in both places ruled the deaths accidental." "That was the official ruling." He looked away. "Yeah, And another son died down south a year ago, October 4th. He was shot to death. His father is Duane Curtis, he asked with a nod toward Jamal. Yeah, I said. He studied Jamal and then me for a minute, something clearly on his mind. Okay, that's all I need to know, he finally said. I'm going to go back over to the scene. The stuff about going to meet his father adds another angle to it, and I have to check that out. I'm going to make some calls and see if I can turn up anything else on those other deaths. Take him home, he added, nodding toward Jamal. If he remembers anything else, give me a call. He pulled out a slightly soiled card with his name and number on it and scribbled his home number on the back. I called my doctor before we left the precinct, and he prescribed a sedative for Jamal, which I picked up at an all-night drugstore on the way home. When the doorbell rang at midnight, I knew who it was. Duane entered the kitchen, a man defeated. He shuffled when he walked in tonight, an old man walking an old man's gait. When he sat down, neither of us spoke. He finally broke the silence. How many days? He asked. I didn't answer because we both knew. 5 days. 5 days between this last death and the one before it. I told you. Why wouldn't you believe me? He muttered accusingly. Don't start, I said. I don't want to hear it tonight. He looked away, and I followed his eyes as they settled on a snapshot of Hakeem that Jamal had taken. Jamal told the cops Hakeem was going to meet somebody to get something for you, I continued. What was he talking about? How the hell would I know? Who the hell would do something like this? Tammy, who could hate me that much? Why don't you tell me, Duane? I've never done anything to bring this kind of shit down on me. You never crossed the limits with anyone, not Miss Lee, not Basil? I watched his face looking for some revelation. A glimmer of sadness or shame, I couldn't tell which, crossed his face, but I couldn't tell what or who it was for. Bettina? Something else hidden from me like that firstborn son in Salem. Can you think of anyone? I didn't finish. I could see the answer in his eyes. If he had known, Hakeem would be alive. Duane got up slowly and went into Jamal's room. I went and stood beside him. Jamal was sleeping deeply, the sedative deadening him to what he had been through. Duane took my hand and held it. I didn't pull away. What if? I knew what he was going to say. Nothing will happen for 5 days, and on that day we'll protect him. We won't let anything happen to him. I'm going to, sit here for a while, Duane said. As long as you need to. It was 2 before he left. Then my own tears started so hard and fast I thought I was going to wake Jamal. I had never wanted him to know the pain I knew when Johnny died. He knew it now, and there was nothing I could do about it. I hadn't been able to protect him from the thing I feared most. Think, I muttered to myself, trying to calm down. Even a madman had to have his reasons, a motive and an opportunity. An opportunity was easy enough if you knew Duane. Anyone could have shot Hakeem. Anyone could have gotten into Duane's mother's house to kill Gerard. Terrence's room was a different story. Miss Lee, Carlotta, Gerard, Basil, maybe all could get to him any time they wanted. Terrence and Gerard, their deaths led back to each other in a riddle of death I couldn't solve. The key had to be that first death, Duane Jr., the one I kept forgetting. I had to get down to Salem, Virginia, Duane's birthplace, where the first son had died. It was already Wednesday morning, then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and finally Sunday. Sunday, the 5th day. There was no time. Griffin was a good cop, I could tell that. But good cops take their time, make sure things are airtight so some smart-ass lawyer won't blow their game with fast-talking logic. Jamal would be dead if we waited for the cops to handle things. Somebody walking over your grave. I dragged a chair from the corner of my room over to my closet. I pushed and pulled until I finally saw it tucked away back where Jamal could never find it. I took it down now and brought it back to my bed. I'd been on the force only 6 months when I bought my gun. a .38, Smith & Wesson, stainless steel model 64. Johnny's gun had killed him. If he hadn't had one ready and loaded, he'd have been alive today. One had killed Hakeem tonight. But the power of the gun is seductive. I held the gun, repulsed, yet fascinated, contemplating the death it always brings. I loaded it quickly without a second thought. Whoever dared to hurt my son would have to come through me first. I would die to save Jamal's life. It was Thursday night. Every hour brought Sunday closer. We had gathered at Dwayne's Big Tudor on Keir Avenue a few hours after the service for Hakeem. I had never been to Dwayne's house before, and the moment I stepped in, I recognized the pink shag rug that had been on our bedroom floor the night I stalked out. His living room had a thrown-together look about it, as if each of his wives had left some discarded bit of herself. Jamal and Dwayne sat together in a far corner of the room. Miss Lee sat in a wing chair, her narrow eyes lighting on each of the assembled guests and finally coming to rest on Dwayne and my son. July, in a white suit, helped neighbors lay out food on the dining room table. I sat on the couch sipping cheap Chablis. I had slept badly the night before, dreams of Johnny haunting me. When I had awakened, I booked a 6:40 a.m. flight leaving Friday that would get me into Virginia by 8:40 and made reservations back to Newark for Saturday night at 5:28. I wasn't sure what I was looking for in Salem, but I figured I'd start by talking with the boy who was in jail for killing Dwayne Jr., and then check out Willa, Dwayne Jr.'s mother. Whatever I did, it would have to be fast. I took a sip of wine and saw Dwayne talking to Jamal. Miss Lee watched them like a hawk. Was that hate in her eyes? "What do you have on Cleotha Lee?" I asked Dwayne this morning. "Did she say I had something on her? I haven't done a damn thing worth any bitch or son of bitch killing my sons over." "You must have, or they wouldn't be dying." "If I knew, don't you think I would tell you?" His voice broke in a way that told me there was no sense in pushing it. I asked Dwayne for Willa's number and the name of the cop, Jenkins, who was in charge of Dwayne Jr.'s case. Then I called Jake, and Phyllis answered. I felt a twinge of guilt, even though Jake and I had never done anything worth being ashamed of. Phyllis told me Jake would be out until late that afternoon, so I told her what I would have told Jake and prayed she was lucid enough to understand. Sometimes she was normal, but on a demon day, she would forget things just for spite. She seemed okay this morning, sweetly repeating what I told her, that Hakeem had died, that I was going out of town, that I wanted Jamal to stay with them till I got back on Saturday night, for Jake to meet me at Dwayne's. "Tamara, Jake will keep Jamal safe. Don't worry." She said it with a certainty that brought tears to my eyes. "I know," I said, my voice caught. "Don't forget to tell Jake, and don't tell anybody else, okay?" I added cautiously. I had her write down Dwayne's address, and she hung up, me praying she would remember. "How about something to eat?" July asked, snapping me from my thoughts with a plate full of greens and fried chicken, comfort food, Southern style. "Girl, you didn't have to bring this over," I said, stuffing a thigh into my mouth. Until July had given me the plate, I hadn't realized how hungry I was. "Hey, this last one has left everybody stunned," she said, sitting next to me. "I just want to do everything I can. But damn, I'm tired," she said with an exaggerated swipe at her brow. "Yeah, you definitely been working your butt off. I hope Dwayne knows how lucky he is," I said, taking a sip of wine. "He won't know the half of it till I'm gone," she said. We both looked over toward Dwayne and Jamal. "Are you going to let your son stay with his father?" "Why would I do that?" "Because he's down to one." "He's staying with me," I said more forcefully than I meant it to sound. "You know he and Carlotta broke up." I heard. You think they'll get back together? He's having such bad luck with his sons. Maybe he'll decide it's time to try again. What the hell is wrong with you, July? I snapped. Why do you say such stupid, thoughtless shit all the time? I don't know, she said thoughtfully. The look on her face pointed to a sadness I sensed she wasn't ready to share. I'm sorry, she said, glancing up at me. I trivialize shit all the time. I think it's one of the ways I have of dealing with grief. No big thing, I said with a shrug. Who the hell was I to judge? Still friends? She asked like a little girl. Yeah, I said. Then she gave me a girlfriend hug. The doorbell rang and Carlotta switched into the room. Well, July purred nastily, look what that cat done drug in. Duane rose in protest as Carlotta approached him, then sat back down, resigned. Jamal came to where July and I were sitting and slumped down on the couch beside me. I hate her, he muttered quietly. I'm inclined to agree with the boy, July said. You don't hate anyone, son, I said, more from convention than conviction. I hate her because she hated Hakeem, he said quietly. Well, I said, trying to sound adult, I don't think Carlotta really hated Hakeem. But why are you defending her? Jamal asked sharply. You know how she felt about Hakeem? He was talking loudly now, and several people glanced up, including Duane. I want to go home, he said, sounding like a spoiled kid. What are we waiting for? We were waiting for Jake, but I hadn't told Jamal my plans, or that he was staying with Jake until Saturday night. I didn't want him mentioning it to the wrong person. Just try to cool out for a couple of minutes, I said. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Jake came in. Our eyes locked, and then we glanced away from each other like we always do in public. Jake walked over to Hakeem's grandmother and took her hand, whispering to her softly. Then he went over to Duane. We can go home in a couple of minutes, I whispered to Jamal, who got up and stalked into the rec room. Who is that who just came in? July said as soon as Jamal was out of earshot. She gestured toward Jake. He's married, I said quickly. Not to, I hope. I shot her a look and she backed off with a playful shrug. Jake caught my eye and gave me a nod toward the kitchen, telling me to meet him there. If you don't go, I will, she chuckled lecherously. I don't chase married men, I said sanctimoniously, then regretted the goody two-shoes sound of my voice. But even as I scolded myself, I realized there was more to my reaction than just my feelings about Jake. It was July's eyes, the hunger in them, hunger and fear. Fear that every woman, including me, feels more times than she wants to own up to. Jake came over to where we were sitting, and July stood, introducing herself with a big smile. Are you a friend of Tamara's? I'm July, a friend too, she said as she pushed her way toward him. I caught the puzzled look in his eye. July noticed it too and moved back to give him some space. On my way, she said. Some girls have all the luck. Who is she? Jake said as soon as July was out of earshot. Duane's secretary. I see the rest of the gang is here too, he said, looking around. Cleotha Lee, right? He nodded toward Miss Lee. Yeah, you were right on that one. Is she part of the reason you're going down to Virginia? Yeah, I think there are secrets between her and Duane. How do you know you're going to find anything down there? He asked. I can't just sit on my ass and wait. I have to do something. I took a breath. So you'll be able to watch him? No problem. You know what you and Jamal mean to me, he said quietly. I'm taking Phyllis and the kid down to see her mother in Camden on Friday night. We'll just take him with us. We both sat there, not saying anything for a minute. Me wondering how Jamal would react when I told him I was leaving town, and feeling how good Jake's firm leg felt leaning into mine. It's probably somebody in this room, huh? I said, watching his face for some sign, some giveaway. What do you think? I don't know. What about Basil? I asked quickly. Do you think it could be him? Jake studied me closely. You know him better than me. I went to fetch Jamal, the three of us silent as we walked to the car, but Jake put his arm protectively around Jamal's shoulder. I didn't tell Jamal I was going to Virginia until we got home. He didn't say too much about it. I figured he was numb and as dead tired as I was. Jake came by around midnight to pick him up and gave me the number of Phyllis's mother in Camden, where they'd be staying Friday night. I watched them all climb into the back seat and lie down. Then I watched the car pull away. I packed quickly after they'd gone and set my clock for 5:30 a.m. Then I climbed into bed and lay there thinking about Hakeem, the red car. Who had it belonged to? A thought came that suddenly chilled me. Without thinking twice about it, I picked up the phone and dialed. "Yeah," he answered. "It's Tamara." "Hey." His voice was husky as if he were drifting off to sleep. A physical thrill went through my body. "Basil, what color is your car?" He paused for a moment as if he weren't sure what to make of the question. Then he sighed as if he were suddenly very tired or very bored. "Any color you want it to be, baby. Any color you want it to be." And he hung up. I lay back on the bed then and pulled the covers up around my neck, my choices in men and the red car keeping me awake. I got into Roanoke, Virginia on Friday morning, checked into a Comfort Inn and made 2 calls. One to Willa Johnson, Duane Jr.'s mama, and the other to Jenkins, the cop who was handling the case against Darnell Lewis, the kid they say killed her son. Jenkins told me the kid was in prison because of circumstantial evidence, driving the dead man's car, buying a watch with his credit card, dumb kid shit. But the kid swore he hadn't done it. With a wide smile, Willa Johnson welcomed me into her kitchen, which smelled vaguely of cinnamon and lemon joy, and within minutes we were sharing intimacies courtesy of our common bond, Duane Curtis. I told her what was happening to Duane's son, what the cops said, and that I was afraid for the life of my son. She listened sympathetically. When her eyes clouded over, I knew she was remembering her own dead boy. "He was my firstborn," she said. "I have the others, but one child could never replace another." We sat there in silence for a moment. Somehow I knew that boy they're holding didn't kill my son. They sewed it up so neat, those cops did, but it didn't make no sense. She looked up at me and gave me a sad half smile. "I'm going to make myself a sandwich. You want one?" Black women in food, sisterly comfort when you need it. I thought about July and how she brought me that plate of chicken at Duane's house. "Yes, thanks," I said. I was hungry. She opened up the refrigerator and took out a bag of bread, some bologna, and a large jar of mayonnaise. "What was Duane Sr. like when you knew him?" I asked. She smiled. "He was a very sweet boy. Duane was 22 when Duane Jr. was born. I was 20. Did he have family? His mother and father were divorced, which was something for those times. Made him kind of special to us kids. He stayed with his aunt and his cousins. He was close to his cousin, Delroy, who was about 15 years older. Duane said he knew a woman named Cleotha Lee when he lived down here. Do you remember her?" "Cleotha Lee? Lord, I haven't heard that name in years." She handed a plate to me and sat down opposite. "She used to go with Delroy. Ooh, girl, that takes me back, way before Duane and me. There are some people who think that she could be the person who's doing the killing," I said, lying. The truth was nobody thought it but me. "She's the only person who has ties to him down here, and this is where things could have started." "Cleotha hasn't been down here in 30-some years. I don't think she could have anything to do with my son's death. Does she have family down here?" "She had a brother, and he had a child. She left to be with him and a woman he married, who people said wasn't no good, but I don't know much about them." "What makes you think Cleotha will have anything to do with Duane Jr.'s death?" "That's what I'm down here to find out," I said. "What happened between them?" Willa took a dainty nibble off her sandwich. "She and Delroy were getting married, but then he broke it off. She had his child. The baby died. Oh, Duane and those dead babies. Never known a man who seemed to have so much of his life tied up with dead babies," she said. "Dead babies? This was a long time ago." When me and Dwayne were kids, you know you hear talk from grown people, half-whispered stuff, before you come into a room. How did the baby die? They say Cleotha killed it. Everybody knew she always had a mean streak. We were all half scared of her when we were little. People say she smothered it while it slept, but I think that baby died a crib death. They didn't know nothing about no crib death back then, and you know how folks talk. Maybe that was what had turned Cleotha into who she had become. Or maybe not. What did Dwayne have to do with that? I asked. He was living there when it happened, but he wasn't nothing but a boy. A sinking feeling of disappointment came over me. I had come all the way down here looking for some connection between Cleotha Lee and Dwayne, and this was it. I tried one last desperate stab. Do you think it's possible Cleotha Lee killed the baby, and Dwayne saw it and has blackmailed her for all these years? It sounded foolish to me even as I said it. Willa Johnson looked at me for a moment, puzzled, and then shook her head sadly. Baby, I know you came down here to save your boy, and I wish I could help you. But Dwayne was 11 years old when this thing happened. Cleotha wasn't more than 23 herself. Dwayne stayed with Cleotha and Delroy on and off, but Cleotha didn't kill that baby. If she had, he couldn't have known nothing about it. Dwayne was such a sweet, gentle boy. It would never occur to him to blackmail somebody. Suddenly, I felt like a fool. Jake's words came back. Let the professionals handle it. I was down there chasing ghosts when I should have gotten my son and gone to stay with my sister. No, I had to be big-time detective. A thought followed by a sense of dread swept me. Basil. He was who was left. Were things leading back to Basil Dupree, who knew where I lived, knew what my boy looked like? My sandwich felt so dry in my mouth I couldn't swallow. I remember Dwayne's sadness when that baby died. Maybe that's what attracted me to him so much later, remembering how he mourned Cleotha's child and Willow's boy later, she said, reminiscing. Willow's boy? Who was Willow? I asked, more out of politeness than anything else. Willow was the girl Dwayne was with before me. I used to tease him because my name was so much like hers. Willow. Now that was one sad story. She shook her head. What happened to Willow? She died. Killed herself. My breath caught the way it always did whenever anyone said those words. Would it never leave me the way Johnny died? It almost destroyed Dwayne. I think that's why I fell in love with him, why I had our baby Dwayne Jr. as quickly as I did, trying to heal his pain the only way a country girl knows how, with her body. It was such a tragedy. Her suicide destroyed Dwayne, I asked, and my anger at him followed a familiar path straight to my gut. How could he not have told me about his loss knowing about mine? Yes, that and the death of their baby boy, Terrell. How did it happen? Was that a crib death too? No, there was no doubt about what happened there. An accident. Dwayne was watching a baby, and Willow's little girl dropped that baby on his head, and he died. Dwayne's son, his firstborn. He always blamed himself. Nothing. In all the time I'd known him. He never told me anything about it, I said quietly. I think it killed some part of him. He changed within that year that we were together. He became mean-spirited and secretive. He left me and our son, went to New York. He sent me some money sometimes, but today I wouldn't know him if he walked into this room. What happened to the little girl who dropped the baby? Willow? That was her name. Her mama named her after herself. I don't rightly know what happened to little Willow. Somebody say they sent her to live with some of their people down deep south, though I heard they weren't all that right in the head. Such a shame, the way it happened. The whole town talked about it. A little girl killing her baby brother like that. Baby born in July, dead by October. I don't know why my mind made the connection. Maybe hearing the 2 months said so close like that. July, October. July is my first name. You were born in July? No, October. My mama had a sense of humor. Born in July, dead by October. A mother dead by her own hand. July was Willow's child. A chill went through me straight to my bones and I shivered. Do you remember what day of the month the baby died? I asked Willa. I knew she didn't. I did, though. I was sure of it. The 4th of October, the day of her son's death a year ago. The day when Terrence died. Willa looked at me blankly, seeing the terror in my eyes. How old was the little girl? I asked. Willa's daughter. About 5 or 6. The age was right. How long after the baby died did the mother die? A couple of days. Shot herself through the head. The local newspaper had to have done something. There had to be a photograph of Willow or her daughter. Is there a library in town? Salem Public Library, she said. Let me write down how to get there. But I was out of the door before she could find a pencil. I usually like libraries. They calm me, but not today. My hands were shaking as I wrote down the dates on the request sheet for the issues of the paper I needed. The research librarian could probably read the anxiety in my face. She got me the microfiche for the local weekly paper and threaded it into the microfiche machine fast, as though my life depended on it. I wasn't sure it didn't. The gray label on the box said the tape ran from July 2nd, 1968 through December 12th, 1968. I sped the film forward to the week of October 10th. Nothing for the week of October 10th. Damn, I said aloud, and rode to the next week, straight to the obits. Her name jumped out at me halfway down the page. Willow Turner. A photograph of a young woman with dimples and her cheeks smiled out at me. Funeral services for Willow Turner, 26, were held on Thursday at the Bynum Memorial Home. Miss Turner had recently suffered the death of her infant son, Terrell Curtis. Miss Turner is survived by her young daughter, Willow, 6, and by an uncle, Dunbar Holt of Tampa, Florida. I looked at the picture again, examining it for the resemblance that I knew must be there. It was her smile that told me. I wondered how Dwayne could have worked with July day in, day out and not recognized it. July, Willow's child. July, who worked in Dwayne's office and knew his habits and those of his sons. July, who Hakeem would believe had something for him from his daddy. The gun that had shot Dwayne Jr. would be the one that shot Hakeem. I would have to get the report from Jenkins, put him in touch with Griffin and DeLorca, and do it fast. Because tomorrow was Sunday and July was in Jersey and my ass was down here. But why? Because she had killed her baby brother? I glanced at the clock, 4:28. I stood up quickly. How could I have not watched the time? I left the library without looking back. I pulled into the airport at 5:15. It was too late. I cursed out everybody within hearing distance. When I'd finished, I sat down in a plastic chair away from the flight attendants who were getting ready to call security, and cried. Finally, I pulled myself together and made it over to the desk to ask the lady when the next plane was leaving. She told me what I already knew. I drove to the car rental place and told the guy I needed to drive the car back to Newark. It would be about 8.5 hours by car if I drove straight through. It was going on 7 now. I could be home by 3 o'clock Sunday morning. I would call Jake once I got on the road and tell him what I knew. It will be all right, I told myself. But it wasn't all right. I stopped on the turnpike to try and call Jake. Then again after I'd been on the road for about an hour. I tried paging Newark Airport where I knew he would go to meet me. Then I tried his place again. Finally, I called Phyllis's mother's place in Camden. Phyllis answered. "What the fuck do you want with him?" she asked. She was having one of her spells. My first reaction was sadness. Then came the panic. Nothing I said would make any sense to her. "I get fucking tired of you calling him at all hours of the day and night." I paused and took a deep breath. "Is Mrs. Williams there?" I asked, desperate to speak to her mother. Pause. "No, get the fuck out of our lives." "Phyllis, I said, trying to reach her. Please, if Jake calls. He's not going to call. He's there. I didn't say that. Phyllis, I'm sorry, I muttered just before she hung up. Sorry that she was back where she was. Sorry for me, for Jake. I hung up and stood there for a minute. Then I tried to call Duane, then Griffin at home. Duane didn't answer and Griffin's machine was on. I slammed the phone down in frustration. I drove fast and angry, mulling over everything I'd found out. I should have been glad that I'd figured this shit out, I guess. But all I felt was scared. It started to rain just as I entered Maryland. Rain makes me sleepy, and the last thing I needed was to run into some damn truck. It was midnight, and I was tired as hell. I pulled off the turnpike to get some coffee and something with a lot of sugar that would jolt me awake. I bought 2 fried apple pies and a large cup of coffee. Then I sat down, watching the rain drip down the window. I thought about how it had been raining the Sunday that everything started. A feeling of guilt wrapped itself around me then for not protecting Jamal like I should have, for not being there now, for being so wound up in things I couldn't get over in my own life, Johnny's death, loneliness, that I hadn't seen July's weirdness for what it was. I went back to the phone and tried to get Jake again. Then I called the station for Griffin. "Can I help you?" a cop with a sleepy-sounding voice asked. I thought a minute. No, he couldn't help me. He wouldn't know what I was talking about. Griffin might not even know what I was talking about. "Ma'am, do you want to give me your name and where you can be reached?" "I can't be reached," I said. "Ma'am, I don't know how I can help you." The irritation in his voice told me he was beginning to think I was a nut. I thought for a minute, then gave him my telephone number and address at home and at Jake's. "I'll see that Griffin gets the message." I climbed back into my car and started driving through Maryland, over the Delaware Bridge, onto the Jersey Turnpike, finally to my block. It was 3 o'clock in the morning and dead quiet when I finally got home. The phone rang as I was unlocking the door, and I dashed into the kitchen to answer it. Too late. It was probably Jake, I decided, calling from Camden to see if I was back, worried because I'd missed the plane. I thought about calling him, then decided against it. He might be up, but his wife's family wasn't. I turned on the faucet and filled a glass full of water. I noticed a saucer and 2 glasses drying in the dish rack. Jake and Jamal. They'd been here, either coming from or going to the airport. Everything was going to be all right. I glanced at the clock, 3:20. I would call Griffin at 8. Jamal was with Jake. She couldn't get him. 3:30. Maybe I should call Jake. He called me. He must be up. No, I'd have to be nuts calling folks at 3:35 in the morning. What was this sense of dread? Why couldn't I shake it? 3:45. Maybe they weren't back in Camden. Maybe they were here. Jake knew how much I wanted to see Jamal. He was probably at home on Springdale Avenue, 15 minutes away. Of course. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. It rang, kept ringing. Okay, so much for that. He was back there in Camden, waiting to hear from me. The phone rang. I jumped so high I had to laugh at myself as I reached to get it. "Jake," I said, "I missed—" "Tamara?" the voice said, the soft, sane voice that belonged to Phyllis. "Tamara, is Jake there?" "No," I said, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. "He hasn't come home yet." "Did you give him the message?" Pause. "What message?" "He called at 10 from the house to say he was staying there." "Did you call him at home?" "I can't get him. I've been calling and calling. He won't answer." "What's wrong, Tamara? Is he there?" "It's okay if he is." "He's not here, Phyllis," I said, and she began to cry. My heart was in my throat now. I felt I was choking. "Don't worry, Phil," I finally managed to say. "I'll take care of it." I said it to her, but I was talking to myself. I hung up and went to my bedroom. I loaded it quickly and slipped it into my pocket. Then I drove to Jake's house where I knew I would find her. You can come in now, Tamara. I know you're here," July said. I stopped dead. Then I ran into the room where she was sitting, wondering what had given me away. I'd come into Jake's house through the basement using the spare set of keys he kept in the gas grill in the backyard. I'd hoped to surprise her, but I was too late. She had shot Jake. He was lying across the couch, blood oozing from a wound on his chest. I thought he was dead. Then he moaned. Jamal held Jake's hand, too scared to cry. July sat across from them in a dining room chair. She motioned for me to enter, pointing the gun at Jamal to make sure I'd obey. I came in and stood within range of the gun. "I know who you are now, Willow," I said. "That was your mama's name, wasn't it? Willow?" I made my voice matter-of-fact, sister sweet. She looked at me surprised, but her eyes were steady and so was her hand. "So, you found out." She smiled then, suddenly friendly, and that scared the shit out of me. I moved in a little, trying to read her mood. "How did you know where to find them?" I asked. "I was waiting," she said simply. "For me?" "For him." She gestured toward Jamal with the gun, and a chill went through me. I began to piece it together then. Jake must have gone to meet me at the airport. When I hadn't come, they'd gone back to the house. She must have been waiting until dawn on this 5th day to come and claim her final victim. When she saw Jamal was with Jake, she must have followed them here from my house. "I just got back from Salem, where you lived when you were a little girl," I said. "I was never a little girl, Tamara." I believed her. "What happened then is over. Don't make it any worse, Willow." But she had nothing to lose now, and she knew it. "I'm sorry, Tamara, but this is the way things have to be." "No, they don't, Willow. If you stop now, you can still." "I have nothing after this," she said with resignation. She nodded toward Jake. "It's too late. He tried to stop me, and I had to bring him into it. I have to bring you into it, too." I was shaking now, but trying hard not to let her see it. Never let an animal see you're scared. Look it in the eye. "Mommy," Jamal said softly, pleading. "Mommy, what are you going to do?" "Shut up, Jamal," I said as hard and as cold as I could, praying he would know I didn't mean it. If I could grab the gun in my jacket, I could use it. I would have to be quick. It was the only chance we had. "How did you know I was here?" she asked, distracting me. "I didn't," I answered nonchalantly, watching her eyes. "I came by to get my son." "At 3 o'clock in the morning?" "Well, I admit," I said with fake charm, "it's a little late, but I knew he was here." I pointed toward Jake. If I could make her remember the few times we'd bonded, maybe I could touch her. "Please, don't play me cheap, Tamara," July said. Her eyes told me she was not a fool and that whatever bonding we'd done wasn't enough to pull us through this. "You're right. I knew you were here. The cops know what has gone down. It's over, July, Willow, whatever you want to call yourself. The cops don't know shit. Sit down," she said, gesturing toward the end of the couch near Jamal. I sat down cautiously, knowing it would make it harder to get the gun. "There," she said, pointing closer to Jamal as if she could read my mind, "and take it off." "Take what off?" I played dumb. "The damn jacket," she said impatiently. "I'm cold." "Bring it here." My breath caught in my throat, but I smiled at her. "Sure," I said, figuring out my options, which were nil. I brought the jacket to her, and she shook it with one hand, banging it against the edge of her chair. The gun hit the wood with a dull thud. "I'm cold," she said, mocking me with a nasty sneer. "What did you expect? More from you." Jake moaned. I yearned to comfort him. "Mommy," Jamal asked, defying my unspoken order, "can I get Jake some water?" "You get it," July said, pointing to me. "You, Jamal, come over here." He glanced at me, and I nodded for him to obey. He stood as far away from her as he could, and she held the gun at his head. Blood was still coming from Jake's wound, and his moans were fainter. I got the water quickly and brought it to him, gently picking his head up to take a sip. He opened his eyes slightly. "You'll be okay," I mouthed to him, touching his cheek. We both knew something would have to happen fast if he was going to make it. "Sit back down," July ordered. Jamal came and sat back down beside me. "It's almost time," she said, shifting in her chair, but never letting the gun move, nor taking her eyes from me. "Time for what?" I asked. "First light," she said solemnly. We both glanced out of the window, then quickly back at each other, her in anticipation, me in fear. "I swore to myself when I started this that the last one would die at dawn on the 5th day, and that's almost now," she said. I thought about Griffin, about Duane. Maybe one of them had gotten the message and would barrel into this room with guns drawn like somebody on TV. Or maybe I would get that moment I was waiting for. But the damn gun was over near her foot. I managed to find my voice, but there was a cold knot of fear in my stomach. "July," I asked quietly, intimately, "why did you start all this?" She smiled slightly. "It happened by chance. By chance. My uncle died. I had to go back to Salem. We got to talking at a club. He said his name, just by chance." I knew who he was. "Duane Jr.?" I asked, and it all came back. "And Duane Jr. told you where to find his father," I continued, filling in the blanks. "I got it out of him. Then I shot him 2 days later," she said matter-of-factly, making me shiver. "And then you came up here?" I asked, finding my voice. "Nah, I had some things to get in Florida first," she said, her voice suddenly hushed. "What things?" "Things to kill a man so nobody will know you've done it. Seeds that don't grow here," she said. "Is that what you mixed with the cocaine to kill Terrence?" She looked at me, her eyebrow cocked slightly in surprise. "Yeah. He called his daddy to ask for some money, said he was sick. I told Duane I'd take the money by. You came to see him the day he died. I knew he'd take him, sooner or later, in time to die on time. And you sent the flowers." "His mama did." "He was mad as hell, said his mama sending them damn flowers and they were making him sneeze and she should have known better. He threw them in the trash when I was there. I gave him the pills then and told him they would take care of the sneezing. Cured him of all his ills, didn't they?" "When Carlotta gave you back the keys to Duane's mother's place, you had a set made for yourself too," I said. "A little whore was with him every Thursday night. I sat in the basement until she left. I heard the water running. I knew he was probably taking a bath. I just drowned him like you do a cat." "Why did there have to be 5 days between them?" I asked, like a teacher prodding a reluctant kid for answers. "Because there were 5 days between when he died and my mother. That was how I made it work out," she answered with a slight smile. Jamal's breath came short and tight, and I took his hand, squeezing it gently. We both knew who was driving that red car and that the gun she was holding had killed his brother. I glanced over at Jake. His breath was shallow and so faint I could hardly hear it. July changed hands, holding the gun in the right. She rubbed the sweat off the left one, and I noticed again the missing ends of her fingers, the first thing I'd noticed the day when I saw her in Duane's office. "He took them in pieces," she said, gesturing down at her deformed fingers. "They said I killed my baby brother and my mama, and I was evil to the core. Whenever I cried for mama, he took little bits of them." "Who?" "My Uncle Holt," she said. My hand went to my mouth, shutting out my involuntary gasp of horror. I knew now what had made Willow's child July. She had left her dead mother to find her fate south of Tampa, and that fate had killed her soul. July shifted her eyes quickly away from mine. "It's time," she said, standing suddenly. I felt Jamal stiffen as his eyes sought mine. "She'll have to come through me before she gets you," I told him in my heart. It was the one truth I knew, but at that moment when she let her guard down, come and gone. "It's not dawn yet," I said to her. I stood moving toward her. It soon will be. The air was still. Jamal's fear palpable in the air, almost like an odor. My heart beat so hard in my chest, I could hear it in my ears. Do you remember what you were doing when it happened, July? There was a twitch at the corner of her mouth. I touched something deep. I pushed on. Do you remember how you dropped him? How it sounded when he hit the floor? I said it maliciously, like a kid teasing someone until she wets her pants. Her eyes went dead for a moment. Then a look of anguish came into them that I will remember until my dying day. He dropped him, she said in a small voice mixed with wonder and fear. He dropped the baby. He couldn't hold Terrell because he was wet. Babies are slippery when they're wet. Couldn't hold him. Had to drop him on the floor? She asked, looking up at me as if expecting me to answer her. He told them I did it. I had to pay him back for what he did to us. What Dwayne had done to her mama, who killed herself, her brother, whom he'd killed, to her, whom he'd sent to hell. She stood there, immobilized by what she had said, and in that moment I lunged toward her, knocking her back against the chair. She glanced up at me, her eyes wide with surprise as she fell backward. The gun she was holding went off over our heads. The sound of a bullet hitting a far wall startled us both. "Damn you," she spat as she aimed the gun at me. But I moved fast, charging her, knocking it from her hand. It skittered across the floor like a leaden animal. We both dove for it, scrambling together in the tight space between the chair and the couch. "Run, Jamal, run!" I screamed, and he scrambled over the back of the couch and nearly to the wall behind it. But in the second it had taken me to look and scream, she had reached for the gun that had fallen, and pushing me out of the way, had aimed for Jamal. The shot she fired at him hit the wall as he ducked behind the kitchen door. She shot again, and he screamed out in fear. In that second, I saw it out of the corner of my eye, lying where she had left it on the floor. I reached forward, aimed, and fired it in one perfect fluid motion. She turned and looked at me, then fell backward, the bullet leaving a hole the size of a dime in the middle of her forehead. I don't remember too much about what happened after that. Jamal called the police. Griffin came. I found out Jake would be okay. But two thoughts stayed with me. Through the cops, the questions, and the sirens that sounded, that Dwayne was the one who had killed the baby, and that I had just killed the sister. What the hell else can I say except I'm sorry? If I could bring that baby back, don't you think I would? Dwayne's voice cracked as he spoke, and his eyes searched mine for something I couldn't give him. When Jamal had heard Dwayne was coming, his mouth tightened into a hard, thin line. "I hate that lying son of a bitch. He's your father," I reminded him. "I don't have a father." "Don't say that. There's nothing you can say to change my mind." I didn't say anything about it to Dwayne. He'd lost all his sons now, even mine, and I didn't see any sense in telling him something he already knew. It became a part of me after a while, Tammy, like a scar. He paused for a moment, his eyes moist. "Do you think I really meant to kill that boy? Did she really think I meant to do it?" "She was a little girl," I finally said. "I didn't even know she was in the room when I told them. They would have tried me for manslaughter, Tammy. They didn't care nothing about no justice for a black man, but a little girl? They forgive her, coddle her, feel sorry for her, go out of their way to see that nobody ever mention it. I figured she probably never even know I told them she did it. Who would have mentioned something like that to a child? How could I have known her mama was going to take it like she did?" "You never know what will happen in life," I said. "You make your choices, and I guess you have to live with them." The words were empty cliches, but I couldn't think of anything better to say. Will, Jamal ever forgive me? Can you forgive yourself? He didn't answer. He just sat there, and after a few minutes, he left. It was the Sunday after Thanksgiving that I finally made my way to her grave. Jake had told me I didn't owe her shit, but I couldn't let it go. They never tell you how hard it is to kill another person. It was a wound that had to grow into a scar, the way Dwayne said his did. The city buried her. I had to bribe a clerk at the morgue to find out where. It was sunny the day I went. I bought some roses at Pathmark. She told me once that she knew she'd never have a funeral, and I told her that she would. So I stood where they say they put her and dropped 6 roses one by one on her unmarked grave. Then I said a prayer, asking for salvation and strength to heal my spirit and that of my son.
Like a rose petal that falls as time moves on, the chill of a wintry night soon passes on. I lose myself when I think of you, when death comes stealing. Hold on to your
This has been a Time Warner Audiobooks production of When Death Comes Stealing, written by Valerie Wilson Wesley. Read for you by Angela Bassett. Executive producer Maya Thomas. Produced and directed by Jill Denby Guest. Text abridged by Nicole Dillenberg and edited by John Whitman. Tape edited, mixed, and mastered by Alvin Clark. Music and lyrics by Ronee Martin and Byron J. Smith. Instrumentals composed by Byron J. Smith.